hours. We'll get your feedback on it. 800-239-9569 if you want to be a part of the show. There's obviously going to be a lot to get to with the college football playoff, not just rankings, but field being set. Probably saw McElroy up in Bristol on the show that released the college football playoff bracket. I was in studio at halftime. Don't know if many of you checked that out yesterday. Just kind of our bowl special last night on the SEC Network, talking about different things. We'll get to as much of it as we can. The information is literally overload right now when it comes to college football. Coaching changes, obviously games over the weekend. Want to break those down, what happened, and then who is in, who is out of the college football playoff. Ultimately, Alabama is out. They do not make the first 12-team college football playoff. Greg, what were your immediate thoughts when you saw that the Crimson Tide was not going to be playing in this year's college football playoff?
I wasn't surprised. This committee all season long, I think, what was it, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we said, all right, they're probably not putting enough stock into strength of schedule when you're looking at an Indiana team with the strength of schedule that was 106 at the time, and they were ranked in the top 5 or the top 6 or the top 7. Meanwhile, you had teams that had the number 1 ranked strength of schedule that were outside the top 10, and yet had pretty good run at that point. So it's really not that surprising. This committee from the beginning said that strength of schedule is not as important. Whether you agree with that or disagree with that is up to the individual. I personally have felt that with expanded conferences and conference schedules that all look very different. I mean, look at Texas's schedule and look at Georgia's schedule. Look at Bama's schedule and look at Missouri's schedule. Those two teams are in the same conference, and yet their schedules are very different. I felt like we need to put more of a premium on strength of schedule. I've been saying it for weeks. But I also have said and maintained, I don't think the committee was going to hold teams accountable in the event in which they lost their conference championship game. So nothing about yesterday was really all that surprising. It felt like when SMU's name was revealed at number 8 on Tuesday, felt like it was going to be very hard for them to be knocked out unless it got sideways. So there's a lot of additional layers to this conversation I think we'll have over the next 3 hours. But that's the initial thoughts that I have at this point.
Yeah, we'll get to a lot of it, and we'll hear from multiple people on it. Just want to give you different opinions on it, different thoughts on it. Paul Finebaum will bump to 8 o'clock today. He's got a couple other TV hits. Ari Wasserman of On 3 is going to join us at 7:30 to discuss exactly what's going on with this college football playoff, give us his thoughts there. Chris Vanini will give us some different information on the college football playoff at 9 o'clock today. Just what it's going to look like for those home teams, who's going to get the tickets, what's the distribution going to look like, all those different things. That way we'll hear from him, and he'll be able to continue discussing those for us. So, again, we want to get to your feedback. We want to hear what you think about Alabama not being in the college football playoff. Give us your thoughts on that, 800-239-9569, 800-239-WJOX. Text in 205-834-9450. I think the most frustrating part for me, Greg, was yesterday morning, waking up and the narrative immediately becoming what happened in the second half of the ACC championship game that you called, and hearing Heather Dinich and other people that were involved saying that committee sat in that room together and watched that game, and the second half comeback for SMU, I think now is going to put this team over the top. And I think that performance in the second half is now what's going to keep this team in the college football playoff. If we're judging teams in the last half of the last football game that they played in a season, whether or not they deserve to be in the playoff, I've got a massive issue with that. That's not something I think I could ever be comfortable with, and that's not something that I think I can rely on people on moving forward if that's how they're going to make a decision on who's going to get in. That has nothing to do with whether SMU should be in or not, whether Alabama should be in or not, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Miami, whatever. It's just I don't need to hear about one half of football is essentially what put you in a 12-team playoff.
I got no problem with that. I mean, I don't think that's what it was, though. I think the committee was looking for any reason to exclude the 3 lost teams when being measured against teams that lost one game in the regular season. I mean, I don't think it was necessarily about the ACC, or when we say second half, it was really more fourth quarter. I mean, it was really a fourth quarter surge when SMU made their run. And I really don't think it came down to the beauty contest for them. This committee has long ranked teams based on win-loss record. And I think they wanted to reward teams that made it to their conference championship game. That's just how this committee was constructed. Cole and I have voiced our frustrations with this committee and the fact that they're not really putting a lot of stock in the things that we think they should be putting a lot of stock into. So I can't say that it was that surprising, though. And I don't know if it really came down to the second half. I just think optically it made it easier. Because ultimately, I think what kept Alabama out was the 21-point loss to Oklahoma. There's 4 coaches or 5 coaches on that committee, people with coaching backgrounds. And I'm sure they were probably bothered by that performance. I understand it as a fan. As a Bama fan, I'm bothered by that performance, so I understand it to an extent. But I don't know if it was so much about margin of victory or fight or resolve or whatever SMU showed in the second half. I think it was more about, hey, guys, do we want to punish a team that made it to their conference championship versus teams, and we'll include Alabama with 4 other teams like Miami, like South Carolina, and like Ole Miss. Or do we want to reward those teams? And I think that ultimately they decided to reward the team that made it, regardless of how the outcome went in the ACC championship game. But I don't think I think the second half made it easier for them to justify than had it gone sideways and had it gotten out of hand in favor of Clemson.
The one thing that I do think this committee did right is reward teams that lost conference championship games. Texas only goes down to the 5 seed. You look at Penn State as they go to the 6th seed and they get to host. So I think when you look at the teams that lost conference championship games, we wondered, were they going to be punished? How far would they be knocked down? What was that going to look like? I do feel like they said, okay, Penn State, you lost the Big Ten title game, you're going to get to host. Texas, you lost the SEC championship game, you're going to get to host. I still don't understand why Ohio State is where they are. If anybody really got jobbed in this entire deal, I think it's Tennessee, based on their record, based on what they've done this year, to end up at the 9 seed and have to travel up north to play Ohio State. And then if you were to win that game, you're going to get the number 1 overall seed. I don't like the path for the Vols, to be honest with you. I think that's a tough one, and I don't think they got a square deal in this whole thing, just based on when you compare what they did to everybody else around them. And they're not going to get to host, and then the path that they're going to have to play potentially in the second round. It's absolutely brutal.
Wait, hang on a second. What's the argument in favor of the Vols being higher? I guess is my question. Because if I look at their schedule, yeah, they have a win against Florida, they have a win against Alabama. That's really it. Their strength of schedule's in the 20s. Their game controls, 10-ish. Around there. I don't recall off the top of my head exactly where it is, and I don't recall exactly where the strength of schedule is, but they did not exactly. I mean, they have 2 wins over teams that are above 500. I kind of would push back there, and I honestly I don't think they looked great in some of their wins either. I think their ineptitudes at times in the first half of football games offensively probably had an effect on the committee's perception. I think Tennessee's a very worthy playoff contender. I just don't know if I would go as far as to say they should be at home and Ohio State should be on the road, because Ohio State, while they have a terrible loss to Michigan, so does Tennessee to Arkansas. And the other thing I would say is Ohio State, the game against Georgia was not competitive. I don't think. So I don't know. What's the argument you have on behalf of Tennessee?
I think the Indiana game, I think Ohio State gets a lot more credit for that game. I think when you look at, and that's where I think you go to the opposite side of, all right, you lost to the SEC champions, and you lost to a team that was healthy on the road. They ended up 6-6, but we know Arkansas wasn't healthy down the stretch. I think they could have been a little bit of a different team if they would have been, but they caught them healthy at home at night, and I think that's a game that they just didn't play well. I don't see there's not a lot of immaculate wins for Ohio State either.
Penn State's a top 6
Penn
team.
State's a good win. Penn State's a really good win. I won't deny that. I can't deny that. But I would give Tennessee credit for at least going and playing NC State. And I know they didn't end up being a great football team.
NC State's terrible.
I'm not saying this year, but I give them credit. They didn't go play the MAC and play the Sun Belt in their non-conference. So that's
the only other thing I would say.
Penn State's the worst team in college football, so I can't brag about that for Tennessee and their non-conference schedule.
Yeah, but look at how they beat them. Game control. All joking aside, like Tennessee, I think Tennessee's. It's a coin toss. The 8-9 is always going to be debated. I don't have a problem with Ohio State being ahead of Tennessee. I really don't. The one thing I would have about this committee as well is they seemingly gave credit to teams that had close losses, and that should be ultimately, we've talked about that for a while. Like a data point, a resume data point, a resume builder should never come in a loss. Oh, you almost beat Oregon. You get credit for that. Oh, you, Boise State, Oregon needed 2 kick returns to beat you. We're going to give you credit for that. That should never be a qualifier for greatness. Like, losing close is not something that you should get credit for, ever. Like, that should not be a resume builder. I understand that you can come out of it saying, all right, hey, that team played hard. They battled on the road. They lost by 1 to the number 1 team in the country. I get that. But Ohio State, I think if you prefer Ohio State to Tennessee, it shouldn't be because they lost close to Oregon. You know what I'm saying?
No, I'm 100% with you on that. You might, and you could say that the teams above 500, but the teams that they beat that are 500 or better, Ohio State and Tennessee have the same amount of teams on the schedule. I just think that they're similar, and I've seen more at times this year that I like out of Tennessee than I do from Ohio State. I feel like Ohio State has been just as inconsistent, just as sloppy at times, but I think Tennessee has been a little bit more dominant against a little bit better teams at different points in time this season. But that goes also, I think one of the things that we're not doing in this, Greg, is asking any questions about Indiana whatsoever. And that's where I think a little bit of the AP poll mindset comes in with this committee. We've seen it multiple times this season where the AP poll, we could always look back, and if they ever had a team at 3 or 4 and they had crummy win, they would never move them down, even though teams below them may do really special things. It's that mindset of, well, if we have them there, we kind of got to keep them there. Or if we drop them down, it's going to be impossible for them to almost move back up. And they didn't do it with every team, but did it with some teams. And Indiana is one of the teams that I feel like they had that old AP poll voter mindset of, well, we had them up there and they haven't completely blown it, so we can't move them down. When you and I both agree it should be a complete reset each and every week. And there are portions of this committee that I don't feel like did that with every team. They did it with some teams because we saw some teams drop way down. Miami comes to mind a couple of weeks ago. We saw some teams go up, but never near as far up as maybe we thought they would. So that is another thing that kind of bothered me, is that AP poll voter mindset sort of crept into this committee a little bit and just left teams where they were, even though there may have been more teams around them that deserved to fall further or go up more than they actually did.
Couldn't agree with you more. The fact that nobody I had this conversation. I presented this argument. Everybody comparing SMU to Alabama. Guys, that's not the comparison. It might be a matter of perspective. Like, it just further proves that the committee doesn't care about strength of schedule this year, and I think that's a mistake. But I always thought that if Indiana was ranked as high as they were ranked, SMU needed to be comparably ranked against Indiana. Indiana and SMU and all the key metrics. SMU's strength of schedule, 57. Indiana's strength of schedule, 67. Indiana's strength of record, 8. Not bad, right? SMU's 15. Still not bad. Game control, 12 for SMU, 7 for Indiana. Like, those schedules are far more comparable than what you're getting from Alabama. Alabama's got the 18th ranked strength of schedule, 6th game control, and 11th strength of record. So the thing about us not really even having the conversation, or the committee likely not having the conversation about, hey, is Indiana really worthy of being in? The one game that they played against quality competition, they lost by 23. I'm just acknowledging the elephant in the room. Like, they lost by 23 points and did not look good whatsoever. Their first touchdown was scored because they had 3 pass interference penalties on the first drive. Other than that, they had 6 yards of offense. 6 yards of offense when it was not mop-up duty. Seriously, in competitive time, they had 6 yards of offense against Ohio State. Explain that to me. And explain to me how that makes sense. So I think you're 100% right in saying, look, Indiana got a free pass here because they wear a Big Ten patch on their chest. And I think it doesn't mean that Indiana won't go and be competitive against Notre Dame. It doesn't. I feel like they avoided any scrutiny in this whole process. And that is, to me, a short-sighted way of looking at the field.
A lot of different ways we can pick this thing apart, a lot of different ways we can look at it and talk about it. We'll try to do all of it across the course of the show today. 800-239-9569. 800-239-WJOX. Going to get to a quick break, but before that, we'll tell you that flu season's ramping up. Make your home healthier with Trane's Clean Effects Home Air Cleaner. Removes up to 99.9% of airborne particles, including those that cause virus, 100 times more effective than standard air filters and 8 times more effective than HEPA room filters. Find a dealer near you at Trane.com. It's hard to stop a train. All right, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about who's in, who's out of this year's 12-team college football playoff next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Glad you're with us. 7:20 a.m. Monday, December 9th, right here on Jocks 94.5, 800-239-9569 if you want to get in, 800-239-WJOX. We talked about Alabama being out of the college football playoff committee chair Ward Manuel on why they went against the Crimson Tide being in.
We looked at the number of wins that Alabama had against ranked opponents. We looked at SMU's schedule, and they were undefeated in conference. Their losses were to ranked teams. But we also looked at Alabama's loss to unranked teams. And it was quite a debate. I mean, we value strength of schedule. That's why Alabama, as a 3-loss team, is ranked ahead of other teams that have 2 losses. It is something that we talk about quite a bit. But in the balance of it, in the way SMU played in that game, losing on the last-second field goal, great win by Clemson, great game, we just felt that in this particular case, SMU still had the nod at 10 above Alabama. But it's no disrespect to Alabama's strength of schedule. It's merely looking at the entire body of work for both teams.
So that's Ward Manuel's thoughts, GMAC, on just why Alabama didn't get in. Do you have any issues with his reasoning as to why the Crimson Tide's not in?
No, not necessarily. I would push back in saying that the strength of schedule is a valuable part of their assessment. I mean, everyone knows why Alabama didn't get in. It's pretty simple to acknowledge that, but it's not about why they didn't get in. It's about, should that be the way things are? That's I think the question that needs to be asked. Like, this committee, it's not surprising that things happened the way they happened. But my question is not necessarily the decision that they made. My question is the process they used to get to the decision. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? It's
sure.
They did not put enough stock into the things that matter. I mean, they did not put enough stock into things that should be at the highest levels of the assessment. And that's fine, but you've created precedent as a result, and I know the committee will change next year, and it'll be different people on the committee and probably different voices on the committee, but this precedent that they created is not necessarily a great one for the future of college football, because it de-incentivizes playing and elevating your out-of-conference schedule, first and foremost, and it de-incentivizes playing a difficult test. Like, it assumes that all schedules are created equal, and it assumes that you are what your record says you are, and when people that know ball sit down and talk, I think everybody would tell you, yeah, you know, that Boise State schedule is a little different than the schedule that some of the other teams in the field have played. And yet, there they are as the 3 seed. So that's my issue with the whole thing.
All right, also Nick Saban yesterday making the rounds on television discussing Alabama not making the playoffs and his potential issues with it.
Well, I think one of the things that I've mentioned, throughout this football season is if we don't take strength of schedule into consideration, is there any benefit to scheduling really good teams in the future? Like, here at Alabama, we're supposed to play Notre Dame, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Florida State in the future outside the league. Well, those are great games for fans to see, and that's what I think we should be doing. In college football is creating more good inventory for great games that people are interested in. But do you enhance people wanting to do that? What's the athletic director going to do? He may go cancel all those games now, knowing that the SEC is tough enough. But at the same time, I do think the best teams are in the playoff, which I think is most important. And no coach should have any complaint about what his circumstance is relative to getting in the playoffs or out of the playoffs, because they all controlled their own destiny, and they all had opportunities, and they had some flaws and bad losses that contributed to their circumstance. So this could be a learning lesson for each and every team and every individual on those teams.
I think we would all agree with Nick Saban's final comments there, just about there were a lot of folks that could control their own destiny here and maybe didn't do enough to be able to continue to find an easier path into the college football playoff. They had it in front of them, Greg, and a lot of them dropped the ball, whether that's Ole Miss, South Carolina, Bama. You had your opportunities, and you didn't get those things done. Therefore, you let it go to the judges, and the judges didn't take you.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I would say about and push back on with what Coach said is that last year Alabama lost that non-conference game that they scheduled, and it didn't impact them. And that was last year, and it was different. It was a 4-team field, and it was unique. But they lost that one game, that out-of-conference challenge, and yet they weren't penalized for it, right? So this year's version of the committee, they felt differently. Maybe had last year's version of the committee been intact for this year's evaluation and assessments, maybe they would have gotten in. But it didn't happen. So I would argue that every year's a little different. To go as far as to say and start threatening, well, we're not going to play out of conference games against quality competition. Fine. Then you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. Because if you want to fill it up with a bunch of FCS teams in your non-con, cool. All you're doing is penalizing the fan. Because who wants to watch those games? So I think that it's a little bit of a catch-22. But I also think there's tentacles to the conversation where you can find a contrarian angle to every possible viewpoint. And that is why it's a fascinating way of handling our business.
All right, we will get to your feedback. Ari Wasserman going to join us after our next break. I'll tell you about Gusty Goulas and the Gusty Goulas Group first. If you're looking for a home in Alabama, you need to call the Gusty Goulas Group. 205-542-1996, brokered by eXp Realty. Serve more than 3,000 home buyers and sellers in the greater Birmingham area. And since 2012, Gusty Goulas Group recognized both nationally and locally as Greater Birmingham, Alabama's #1 team in homes sold. Gusty helped my mom sell her house. She got more than she ever thought she would get. Had more people come and look at her home than she ever thought she would have, and then got her into her new home as well. Much better deal than she was imagining, all thanks to the Gusty Goulas Group. Most agents start marketing after you list with them, not Gusty. He's been doing this. He's ahead of the curve, got all the latest technology to be able to help serve you, home buyer or seller, in the greater Birmingham, Alabama. Just Google Gusty Goulas Group and see what those over 835-star Google reviews are saying, or go to GustyGoulasGroup.com. That's 205-542-1996 or GustyGoulasGroup.com today and start packing. Ari Wasserman of On 3 will get his thoughts on Alabama not being in the rest of the field and maybe get into some of the matchups that are going to take place in this year's college football playoff. All next right here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. College football playoff field is set. Take you through the bracket here quickly. Number 1 seed, Oregon, obviously going to get a bye, and then they will play in the Rose Bowl. They'll play the winner of the 9 seed and 8 seed game. Tennessee will be at Ohio State. The number 2 seed, the Georgia Bulldogs, after winning the SEC championship. They will get the winner of 10 seed Indiana, 7 seed Notre Dame. Game in South Bend, Indiana. Greg McElroy going to be on the call for that game. Pretty cool that GMAC is going to be calling a college football playoff game. And then they'll get the winner of that game in the Sugar Bowl, and that'll be the 2 seed Georgia. 3 seed Boise. They'll get the winner of 11 seed SMU versus the 6 seed Penn State in Happy Valley. That scene will be awesome. And that game will take place in the Fiesta Bowl. The 4 seed Arizona State, hot right now, 11-2. They win the Big 12, dominant fashion. They will get the winner of the 5 seed Texas playing at home in Austin against the 12 seed Clemson Tigers, who win the ACC to get in. And that game will be in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. So Texas welcomes Clemson. Ohio State welcomes Tennessee. Penn State welcomes SMU. Notre Dame welcomes Indiana. Winners of those games will go on to play Arizona State in the Peach Bowl, Oregon in the Rose Bowl, Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl, Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. As it pertains to paths, quickly, Greg, was there one that you really liked or really didn't like when you sort of saw this bracket and began to picture your way through it?
Well, I really like a lot. I really like Texas's path, just from a matchup standpoint. I look at Clemson. I think Clemson's very human. I do think Clemson's got some pretty good weapons on the perimeter, but that'd be really about it as far as what's to be expected from the Tigers. I don't think they'll be able to run the ball. I think Texas's defensive front will wear out Clemson. And then I look at Arizona State, and while they're hot as can be, I really respect them. I think Kenny Dillingham's done a terrific job. Cam Scatterbo is the guy that you got to stop. And he's not running for 170 on Texas. I feel pretty confident about that. So I think they have a really good setup. And then they might play against an Oregon or an Ohio State or a Tennessee team that might be beat up from their previous 2 games. So I think things for Texas are about as smooth sailing as it gets through the first 2 rounds. And that illustrates my problem with our current format. It's ridiculous that these conference champions get automatic entry into the quarterfinals. If you're a conference champion, that's great. You are guaranteed a spot, but you are not guaranteed a first-round bye. And that, I think, is a real issue, because the 2 teams that lost their conference championship game, they might have more manageable paths to the semifinals than the teams that won the conference championship games. Georgia might have to play Notre Dame in the second round, and Oregon might have to play Ohio State or Tennessee in the second round. That, to me, is really unfair, and it illustrates the problem that we have right now with the current seeding format in college football playoff.
Yeah, I think the one that I initially saw that I just did not like for them at all would be Tennessee. And then the path that I really liked was Georgia. I think they match up extremely well with Indiana or Notre Dame. Physicality is not going to be an issue, and I think some of their athleticism on defense with their physicality would aid what Indiana and Notre Dame wanted to do. Now, we'll find out about the quarterback situation, and obviously that'll make things very different for the Georgia Bulldogs moving forward. I don't expect Carson Beck to be back. That's just my opinion. He couldn't grip the football, couldn't hold the football when he was trying to come back in the game in the second half. And when you saw the way that injury took place, it did not look good. And also, I guess we should probably have the understanding that Gunnar Stockton was most likely concussed at the end of that game. I was standing right by the goalpost where he was heading into the end zone, and it was one of the more vicious hits I've seen in a long time. So we'll see how the quarterback scenario plays out, but that was one that I liked, because then you have potentially a Boise or SMU with an upset that you could get if Penn State doesn't find their way through. So the path for Georgia, one that I really liked as far as how this college football playoff lays out. All right, let's go to some of your calls, get a little bit of your feedback. Chris in Birmingham wants to talk college football playoff. Chris, welcome into the show.
Hey, guys. I think my biggest thing is I don't like the automatic qualifier just because you win your championship. Because to me, you have SMU seated above Clemson. So you're telling me we really didn't like Clemson, but the reason they're in is because they won one game.
How about Clemson beat the number 8 ranked team in the country and moved up one spot? They were actually ranked number 16 by the committee yesterday. They moved up one spot. That's how much the committee disliked Clemson. Think about that. Think about how crazy that is. And the only reason they moved up a spot is because the team in front of them, Iowa State, lost. So they just switched spots with Iowa State. And they beat the 8th ranked team in the country. That's how little the committee liked Clemson. I completely agree with you. It's crazy.
Yeah, and and to me, the ACC this year should have been at best a one-bid league. Now, I don't know, after the championship loss, I think your head-to-head would have been SMU and Miami for that one bid. And like I said, that's what irked me the most was just, Clemson gets in based on one win. And if you're going to do that, SMU has to be the 12 seed versus the 11. And that was my whole thought about the conference qualifiers. I think that's the biggest thing that.
Let's get back to why the conference qualifiers exist. Okay, so I agree with you. I think automatic qualifiers are ridiculous. Do I want other conferences to matter? Yeah, I do, kind of, but not necessarily to be guaranteed that they matter. In some cases, because what if Clemson was 8-4 and SMU was 8-4 and they're playing for the ACC championship game and they were measuring them against let's just say a 9-3 Memphis that won the American. I don't know. I don't necessarily want that. I think automatic qualifiers are ridiculous, but the reason why we had to have them is because for the playoff to expand from 4 to 12, you had to have unanimous support from the 9 conferences that decided upon this and the athletic director of Notre Dame. You had to have unanimous support. So the SEC and Greg Sankey and the Big Ten and Tony Petitti and or Kevin Warren, whoever was in charge at this point when they decided to expand, I don't remember who it was, they had to give away a lot to get all 10 voters to be on board. I think they personally gave away a little too much this time around, but I don't anticipate it being the same way when they go back to the table in 26. The SEC has way too much leverage, as does the Big Ten. But in order to implement a 12-team playoff, you had to give away a lot, and I don't think it's going to happen again. So understand this is probably a 2-year sample size with this specific type of format. So that should be encouraging for everybody that dislikes the way things are currently going.
All right, appreciate the call, Chris. Let's get to a break. More of your feedback coming up. Ari Wasserman, try to connect with him next right here on Jocks 94.5. Monday, McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, college football playoff field set. We haven't even started breaking down the championship games from Saturday as we've just been digesting who's in, who's out, where teams are seated, what the path is going to look like for a national championship, what this field looks like. And we'll continue that conversation now with Ari Wasserman of the On3 Sports Network. You can see he and Andy Staples on YouTube. Listen to wherever you get your podcasts. It is a every week listen for me when I'm coming from my game to Charlotte on the airplane. First thing I go to is Ari and Andy to check them out and see what they're saying, not only about the games, but about Domino's Pizza Cheesy Bread. Ari, the playoff field is set. Was there a part of it that you are frustrated with? Obviously, we're going to get to Alabama at some point, but either a team seated too high, a team seated too low, the path that a team has. What part of this did you look at and just say, you know what, that doesn't sit right with me about this year's college football playoff field?
You know, Cole, I can't tell you how honored I am to be here. So thank you so much for letting me spew my nonsense on here. My number one frustration with the committee over the years has been inconsistent thinking in the same poll. Like, there are times where they will rank teams in their same rankings differently for different reasons, and that drives me nuts. If you're going to, put a stake in the ground and rank a team because you feel a certain way, then you should feel that same exact way about everybody. So even though the rankings yesterday caught me off guard because this year the committee emphasized and put a line in the sand about the importance of playing in their conference championship game, but they did that with everybody. Like, for instance, inconsistent thinking would have been, ranking Penn State and Texas really high in the poll after losses and then putting Alabama in. Like, I would have gone crazy because it wouldn't have been consistent. So if you don't like the way they did it, that's your prerogative, but at least they did it in a way that was the same for everybody. And I think that I can live with that. The thing that is interesting to me is, for the first time in I think a decade of this, they ignored resume to a certain extent and just rewarded teams that were good enough to make their conference championship game. Because if you go look at teams like Penn State being ranked ahead of Ohio State and Texas being ranked ahead of Ohio State and other teams that had better wins in the same record, in the past there was not this reward for going. It was, you play the game, you lose. If you have the same amount of losses, we go back to resume. So Andy and I did a projection on Saturday night after all the games that was very wrong, because we did it based on resume and strength of schedule and quality wins. And, at the end of the road, that's not how they ranked the teams, which, was surprising, but again, doesn't drive me crazy because I thought it was a consistent poll.
It's hard to push back on any of that. I guess the one question I would have is, does this set a concerning precedent? I think there was really, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, regardless of which direction you went yesterday, because you either devalue conference championship games or you devalue strength of schedule. And that, I think, is a concerning, either outcome is concerning. So I do think they took the lesser of two evils, but I also think it does create potentially a slippery slope, Ari. So do you think this will change people's scheduling philosophy moving forward, knowing that if strength of schedule isn't rewarded, there's really no point in us trying to make our road tougher?
All right, you want fire? You want some spice? Here's some spice, because I just wrote a column about this last night. I don't know if it's on the internet yet, but that's wrong. Like, that's not true. The strength of schedule is rewarded. Okay, it's rewarded in a different way, but it was rewarded this year. If Alabama had the same exact resume, but they played in the ACC, they would not have finished 13th. When you play in the SEC and you have a tougher schedule, you have more margin of error for getting in. The problem with Alabama's situation is that they did not. They went too far with what happened. Like, they got to 13th with two terrible losses, and a team from the ACC with those same losses wasn't even sniffing the playoff. Like, think about the difference between Miami and Alabama. Like, Alabama played a tougher schedule than Miami, but they were in the mix at the end because of their schedule. Like, it did matter. They just didn't have a good year. And, like, I don't know if they're going to, the whole year, the teams that played the harder schedules got the benefit of the doubt. Ohio State had 2 top 10 wins, so they fell, 4 or 5 spots when they lost to Michigan, when Miami fell like 9 and out of the playoff. Like, teams that played.
What about Indiana?
Rather,
what about Indiana? I'm not even so much talking about Alabama. I'm talking more about Indiana. Because I don't think Indiana's kind of avoided all criticism, and I don't feel like they should have.
Well, I think that they should have, because Indiana had 0 margin of error. Because if Indiana would have lost another game, they would have been definitively out because of their bad schedule. So here's the thing. If you have a tough schedule like Alabama or an SEC team did, you are afforded the opportunity to lose 2 games. Okay? So if Ole Miss and Alabama would have missed the playoff because they lost twice, and Indiana would have gotten in with 1 loss, then there would have been a bigger debate about this. But the fact is that Indiana didn't. So, like, you are rewarded for playing a tougher schedule, but there's a limit of how much you can lose. You can't lose 3 times and be definitively in. If you can lose twice with that schedule, Indiana could not have lost twice. Alabama could have lost twice, and Ole Miss could have lost twice, and South Carolina could have lost twice, but they lost an extra game on top of that. Like, playing a harder schedule is rewarded, but there has to be a limit of how much you can lose before this isn't an argument anymore. Like, if Alabama would not have lost to Oklahoma, they might have been in over a team like Indiana. I don't know, but Indiana had much slimmer margin of error when it came to what games they could lose, and that's how the strength of schedule manifested. So saying it doesn't matter is not true. It just means that teams played an easier schedule and were good enough to not lose bad teams on that schedule. Like, if you're upset about Indiana, then what should they have done? Just not played their season? Like, I just don't understand, like, what the alternative is. Like, they played in the Big Ten. They got a good draw. These 18-team super leagues are never going to be equitable schedules. Like, some years you're going to get a Texas schedule. Some years you're going to get an Alabama or Georgia schedule. That's the way it works. Sometimes Indiana's going to play Michigan when they're the number 1 team in the country, and sometimes they're going to play Michigan when they stink. It's like, we're not talking about a G5 team here. We're talking about a Big Ten team that got a good draw, and a Big Ten team that has spent the last 10 years or 15 years playing in the Big Ten East and having to play Ohio State, Michigan State, and Ohio State every year. So, it's a Big Ten team. Like, their schedule stunk this year. And I know it's annoying that SEC teams didn't get in, but, like, they played in a tough conference and they got a good draw and they took advantage of it. Like, that's the way the sport works. And if you don't like that, then why are the conferences 18 teams? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So, like, I wrote a column today about, like, okay, Alabama, if Greg Burns sent last night that, hey, we got to think about strength of schedule. It's like, well, what if Wisconsin was number 11? They'd be in right now. Like, that scheduling isn't the problem. It's who you lost to and how many times you lost. And I don't know why we're losing track of that.
Ari Wasserman of the On3 Sports Network joining us on the Buyers Right Hotline. So let's move a little bit past the teams that could have, should have, or maybe even some of the whys, Ari. When you looked at the seedings of the actual teams that got in, did that feel right to you as far as where the committee placed the teams that they did place in the 12-team playoff?
Yes, I think it feels right to me based on the framework that we are working with. I don't think that the rules should be the same anymore, and I think they're going to change. I don't think that you should give automatic bids to the teams that win their conferences. So if you don't like the strength of schedule situation, like Clemson probably shouldn't be, a Big 12 team probably shouldn't be the number 4 seed. I think that we should be ranking the teams based on where they're ranked in the poll. That way there's an equitable bracket. Like, I think it's stupid that by losing the Big Ten championship game, Penn State has an easier path to the semis than Oregon. Like, that to me is dumb. But there's nobody that I'd be like, oh God, they're 5, but they should be 11. Like, I think that they did a pretty good job of ranking it based on their criteria. And here's the other thing you guys said that stands out to me. And I remember this like yesterday. But the first year that the playoff happened in 2014, when I was covering Ohio State, I used to get amped up to get on the playoff committee teleconference and ask questions about deliberations and precedent and all this stuff. And, like, there is none of that. It's 12 people or 12 new people all the time, and they just do what they want. And this is how the committee ended up doing it this year. Like, next year, they, if it were 12 different people, they might have put Alabama in. But these people decided in this given year that they were going to reward conference championship appearances. That doesn't mean that that's going to be the case forever. Like, if you've noticed, like in the past, what they say on the teleconference and what they do on the final day is completely what they want to do in that moment. So I don't know if going from 4 to 12 is going to be a fundamental shift on how the committee actually goes about their business. But like yesterday, the rankings that we got weren't the ones that we anticipated. But the fact of the matter is that all the teams that we knew were going to get in got in. So like, if you want to get fired up about seeding, then that's your prerogative. But like, they did put the teams in that were supposed to go. Like, there was nobody out of the playoff, in my opinion, that should have been in it. So like, for me, like when, a year ago at this time, we were arguing about whether or not Florida State should have even been able to play for a championship. And then you're talking about like seeding. It's such a lower stakes conversation to me that like, it doesn't even fire me up all that much. Like, everybody who is supposed to be in is in. Next year and the year after, they've got to figure out how to make sure that if you are the number 1 seed, you have the easiest path. But other than that, like, I don't think that anybody was egregiously ranked. I think that they used the criteria that was important to them, and then they ranked them accordingly based on that criteria, and it was all consistent, which is what, keeps me up at night when it's not.
Absolutely. Ari, great stuff, man. Thanks for hopping on with us. We appreciate the time. Enjoy your work, and we'll catch up again soon.
Appreciate you guys, and thanks so much for having me on. Enjoy your week.
Absolutely. Ari Wasserman with the On3 Sports Network joining us on the Buyers Right Hotline, breaking down the college football playoff. We'll do more of it on the other side with Paul Finebaum. We'll get your feedback after that. 800-239-9569. 205-834-9450. Call or text that number. Tweet in at Mac and Cube. We'll go to your feedback in the 8 o'clock hour. Chris Vanini with us at 9 to give us just some logistical information on how this playoff is going to work for home teams, how this playoff is going to work for travel, different things of that nature, because it's new for a lot of folks, and we don't know exactly how it's going to work and exactly what it's going to be. Before we do that, Greg, tell our listeners about the Pants Store and why they need to stop by today.
I actually think I am going to swing by at some point this week. Finally have a little time. Need to get some gear for basketball season. It's the game day headquarters. Felt like I got a bunch of Bama stuff, but not enough. So I'm going to go over there, probably grab a hoodie, maybe grab a quarter zip, maybe a polo, who knows. But need to get some new game day gear, and Pants Store is the headquarters for that. They also have the clear purses for the ladies. They have dresses, shoes. They have all sorts of stuff that can have you looking good for game day. So zip on down to the Pants Store for all your game day needs.
Not even close to finished here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, talking college football playoff. Next hour, we look back at the SEC championship game, look at other conference championship games, how those teams got it done, how those teams got in, the matchups in the playoff, and we get your feedback as well. But when we return, we will hear from Paul Finebaum, his thoughts on Alabama being out, where Georgia is seated, where Texas is seated, where Tennessee is seated, and what he expects that this playoff field and how it was created will change things moving forward in college football and for the college football playoff. We'll do all that and more next right here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. 8 o'clock, hour number 2 underway. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, Monday, December 9th. Day after the first ever 12-team college football playoff field has been set. And Paul Finebaum of ESPN, the SEC Network, will join us now to discuss it. You can hear him weekdays 2 to 6 p.m. right here on WJOX. And he joins us each and every Monday thanks to our friends at Craneworks.
Lift it, load it, grade it, grind it, move it, haul it, rig it, dig it, Craneworks, Rentalworks, yeah! The big dog's got it.
Paul Finebaum on Mac and Cube in the morning is brought to you by Craneworks. Lift it, buy it, rent it, the big dog's got it. Now, Paul Finebaum.
Good morning, Paul. Appreciate you taking some time to be with us. Just want your initial thoughts on Alabama not being in this year's college football playoff field. What did you think when you first saw it come down and there was no Alabama in the 12-team playoff?
Well, I think most people reasonably could conclude by about midnight on Saturday when that field goal went in that Alabama was out. And I understand that. I don't think it's the right decision. But on the other hand, Cole, it's hard to gather a lot of steam in defending Alabama because ultimately Alabama killed themselves. That loss to Oklahoma was what the committee used against them, even though that is contradictory to everything they had said the previous week. But ultimately, the reason why Alabama didn't make the playoff is more Alabama's fault than the committee's.
Yeah, it's kind of the way I feel, Paul. I also feel like the committee and the whole process needs to be reevaluated a bit. In an era with bloated conferences and schedule inconsistencies, there needs to be a greater premium put on strength of schedule, but hopefully that's an adjustment that can be made next year. I would look at, and my big question for you though, Paul, is the seeding. To reward Boise and Arizona State with the 3 and 4 seeds respectively feels ridiculous. And it needs to be adjusted immediately. How quickly can something like that get fixed?
How about immediately? Because I think that everyone understands that. And again, this was an express lane tournament this year. I mean, they threw it together. They had to make everybody happy. Greg, you know the story better than anyone. And that's what we got. And I'll take it over 4 or 2. But I think that there is an absolute 100% certainty that when this group all meets formally on the morning of January 20th in Atlanta, the day of the championship, they'll hash this out. And the difference between today and a couple of years ago is that the two people that carry not most of the weight, but all of the weight are Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti. And I would be shocked if these two aren't already in communication trying to figure it out. Even though the Big Ten fared fairly well, they are now drafting partners, and it won't happen again, guaranteed.
Paul Finebaum of ESPN and the SEC Network. Hear him 2 to 6 right here on WJOX weekdays. How quickly do you expect some sort of change? We know this contract and when it runs out, and we expect to change then, but do you expect any sort of massive overhaul before that?
Yeah, I think they have to tweak it for next year, Cole. I mean, what Greg said is a glaring weakness, and especially if you're looking at what Penn State's route to the semifinals is, it's ridiculous. Somebody was going to get that path. I don't know how you get that path after losing a game, but that's okay. Ultimately, they can do whatever they want. This is not law. It was just a formula, and if Sankey and Petitti go in there and say we're changing it, or if we don't change it, we're getting X number of guaranteed automatic bids, then what are these other conferences going to do? Because I know a lot of threats are being made today, from changing schedules to pulling out. That's not going to happen. But the rest of the conferences are going to do whatever the SEC and the Big Ten want.
Paul, what do you make of the ACC and the overall evaluation? I think most people are really frustrated with Clemson getting in. I think people are having a hard time wrapping their head around that, especially considering they lost to an SEC team the week before. do you think there will be more scrutiny on the ACC moving forward as a result of what went down this past weekend?
Well, listen, you were there, Greg. So I don't want to say something that you don't already that you know or haven't picked up. But the ACC was the conference in the middle of this entire conversation this year, and I think the ACC through SMU, ironically, a new member, is going to what was the biggest beneficiary. Forget the conference champion. I mean, that's self-explanatory how that works, but by SMU, because I think the FSU hangover from a year ago today really affected this committee. That as well as the obvious, and I think this is the most obvious, whether if Alabama gotten in, it would completely have devalued all these conference championship games. So the ACC looks better than it probably really is. The fact that the ACC has two and the SEC only has three is pretty remarkable. I also think there's a lot of pressure on SMU and Clemson, though. If SMU gets blown out or loses to Penn State, and I think the real interesting one is Clemson. Think about this: on December 21st or whatever it is, if Texas beats Clemson, that would give Clemson an 0-3 mark in the SEC this year, and I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. I mean, it's pretty ironic. Everybody knows about the 34-3 loss to Georgia at the beginning of the year, the South Carolina loss 2 weeks ago, and ultimately one more, and that even makes the argument for the ACC even more difficult.
Paul Finebaum joining us on the Buyers Right Hotline, talking college football playoff. I want to go back to the SEC championship game, though, and maybe the narrative around either Kirby Smart or the Texas Longhorns and Steve Sarkisian. Did your mind change? Did your thought process change on those two coaches and maybe what they are now capable of or not capable of in this year's playoff?
I think they're both very capable. I mean, we're talking about preeminent coaches. We know that already. It was a bizarre game, Cole. I was really impressed, especially with Kirby Smart's team, at just figuring out some way to win that game with everything literally going against them. It felt to me, and I'm curious about you being on the sideline, how many opportunities Texas just threw away early in the game that really could have put them in a strong position. But ultimately, with Alabama knocked out and going through this transition, we were looking at the new major domos in the SEC on Saturday afternoon, and I don't see that changing.
Paul, do you feel like Georgia or Texas? Do you feel like the SEC has a chance to win the national championship this year? Like, do you think that would you lean that direction, or are you still kind of up in the air?
No, I mean I have a slight lean toward Georgia, although I see the path for Texas as well. I think the X factor is Carson Beck. What exactly is his condition? Both quarterbacks, even if he is around, have had their issues this year. But I think right now I do like Georgia's chances with an asterisk by Carson Beck's condition.
Paul Finebaum joining us on the Buyers Right Hotline, talking college football playoff. When you look over the bracket, is there a team that you feel like, that this is their tournament to take? I feel like this is easily the favorite to go ahead and win the first ever 12-team college football playoff.
I don't think it's clear cut, Cole. I mean, I think I like Georgia from one side and Oregon from the other side. I mean, Oregon is that quiet team, and I don't mean to act like we haven't been watching them all year, but we spent so much time talking about Ohio State. I think Ohio State's path is rather difficult on that front, but I don't think there's an overwhelming favorite. But Georgia and Oregon to me are the two most likely. I mean, you can make a case for Texas on one hand. You can make a case for Notre Dame. Listen, Penn State probably has the easiest path, but trusting James Franklin is not something I'm willing to do.
Paul, finally, when you look and the dust settles, Kalen DeBoer is sitting there with a 9-3 football team. They'll have a chance to play against Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl. That's a big opportunity. It'd be a ton of eyeballs. I called the game that they played in the Citrus Bowl, and I still think it's like one of the second highest rated games I think I've ever done, behind the playoff game. I think it had 12 million viewers back in 2019, in January of 2020. So in victory, they extend their 10-win streak. I still think there's an awful lot on the line in this game, but how important is the bowl game for Alabama and Kalen DeBoer?
I think it's very important because Nick Saban, as you mentioned, that game, the game, what was it, 2 years ago in the Sugar Bowl? When other than going back to I think 2008 and obviously following the 2013 season, he has done a really nice job of using that. Alabama's done a nice job of using that bowl game to solve the wound of a disappointing season. I don't think I think the 10 wins will be nice. I don't think he'll get it. I think he's beating a very discounted Michigan team. So the win would be nice. Nice being the operative word. A loss would be absolutely catastrophic. Because suddenly you go from a 10-3 season that should have been better, that could have been better, to a 9-4 season that looks absolutely disgraceful. So who's going to play in the game? Who's really going to care about the game? Kalen DeBoer better, and I know he will. But he's got a great deal on the line because the mystique of Alabama took a major hit yesterday because that's a spot that we're so used to Alabama getting in. And I don't think, for all the folks out there who continue to talk about this dynasty of Alabama, I mean, we don't need to say it's over. It's been over. But if anyone who doubted it was over, just rewatch the show yesterday and see them missing the playoff.
Paul, we always appreciate the time. Always great stuff. I know it's been a busy weekend for all of us. Look forward to seeing you over at the studio in a few hours. Thanks for hopping on with us.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Paul Finebaum, ESPN, the SEC Network, joining us on the Buyers Right hotline. We'll follow up on what Paul had to say. A lot more to get to, a lot more to cover with this year's college football playoff. Your feedback next, 800-239-9569. Going to break down the SEC championship game on the other side as well. But we're not going to do that until Greg tells you about B-Dry.
B-Dry's been serving Alabama and customers here in this community for 60 years. They continue to back things up with the life of the structure warranty. It really gives me great peace of mind knowing that if there's something that goes wrong in my basement or crawl space, they'll come out, they'll get it taken care of. That's why B-Dry's the very best of the biggest in the world. They are the strongest in the United States, and I know that they'll get things taken care of for you. So go and check them out today at bdryalabama.com. Now you're also going to get 12 months interest free. That's 12 months interest free, so no payments for 12 months, and you get things taken care of. Call them today, 942-1976, bdryalabama.com.
All right, when we come back, we will talk SEC championship game, how Georgia got in, where they did, and why, as well as get your thoughts on the college football playoff 12-team field. 800-239-9569 or 205-834-9450. You can text in there next. What about calls? 8:17 a.m. Monday, December 9th, right here on Jocks 94.5. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Now your chance to give us your feedback on the college football playoff field. 12 teams are set. The seeds in order, starting with 1, Oregon. Georgia 2, Boise State 3, Arizona State 4, Texas at 5, Penn State at 6, Notre Dame at 7, Ohio State at 8, Tennessee at 9, Indiana at 10, SMU at 11, and Clemson at 12. Your thoughts on how that played out, how that looks, what it's going to mean. 800-239-9569. Johnny in Birmingham wants to chime in. Johnny, welcome into the show.
Hey, good morning. How are y'all?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. I mean, I have some comments. I just want to start with this. If you were on a, say on a blimp looking down at the big picture, this is a summary of what this committee did yesterday. And I don't mean to be repetitive of things you said, but so they made strength of schedule, even though they talked about it, really not that important, because they decided, well, we're gonna talk about it for weeks and weeks, and then when push comes to shove, we're gonna sit there and try to maintain conference championship games, which I think need to be reevaluated too. Look at Carson Beck, what happened to him. And so we're going to go ahead and put SMU in. So they leave Bama out, which takes out the potential of a Bama Penn State, Bama Notre Dame, great TV game, I think we could all admit, right? Then they put in a top 4, which includes Arizona State and Boise State. So if you're in a blimp looking down at the big picture, you're saying that the top 4 teams in this tournament, like any of us that played athletics, and you get a seeding. I used to play tennis. If I was number 2 in the state, hey, that means I'm really good. We're saying that ASU and Boise State are the top 2 of the top 4 teams in the country. That's a joke. And then putting in Clemson, who everybody and their brother didn't want to see them in, but they got in by winning that game against a subpar SMU team. That's a joke. So basically, and then by the way, if you're a Tennessee fan or Ohio State fan, you should be upset because they put their 3, other than Georgia, their 3 best marquee teams in the same bracket, meaning you're going to eliminate Tennessee, Ohio State, right, in the first game, one of them, and then they have to play Oregon, which, by the way, we've already seen Oregon play Ohio State in the second game. So the bottom line is I think TV rankings are going to tank on this. I think people are not really going to be interested in this whole playoff as it is, because other than the Tennessee-Ohio State game and a final of maybe like Georgia-Oregon, I'm asking you guys, tell me where the must-see TV is. And I hate to say that, like, especially for you guys, because you guys call these games, but I'm just being honest.
Clemson,
Saban,
Texas, you don't think it's going to rate?
Which one?
Clemson at Texas?
No. Nobody wants to watch Clemson again.
You don't think Tennessee, Oregon, or Ohio State, Oregon in round 2 would rate? You don't think Notre Dame, Georgia in round 2 would rate?
My only point is
go back and look at what Notre Dame, Georgia in the regular season did a few years ago.
My point was Tennessee, Ohio State's the only must-see TV, and then a potential final. No, I don't want to see Clemson play Texas, and I'm telling you, I'm a fan. I have every right to say that.
You have no interest in Tennessee, Oregon in the quarterfinals, or Notre Dame, Georgia in the quarterfinals.
I told you the Tennessee, Oregon is the only bracket that's interesting, but it burns itself out after the second round. Meaning you watch
Oregon,
Ohio
Texas
State.
in the semifinals. You have no interest in that. Penn State, Georgia in the semifinals. You have no interest in that.
Now, I see your point, Cole, but no, not really.
Well, I'd be willing to bet that a lot of people do, and that's. I mean, I understand that if it's not your favorite team that's in there, but there are a lot of consumers of ball, and that's going to be good ball, no matter how you want to spin it, whether it's the team that you love or not.
They've diluted. It's not about loving Alabama. They've diluted the tournament by putting in ASU and Boise State, And then they created, like, in other words, as Paul Finebaum just said, they created this very easy path for Penn State, which is we all know is a joke. So it's like the way they seeded it, you can leave Alabama out. It's not about Alabama. But the way the conference champions get the automatic bid, and we already know it's a problem, and we know this will be probably tweaked. But what they've done is they've made it certain parts of the brackets irrelevant. You have to wait and wait and wait to hopefully get a good game, and because we got to sit through these teams that don't even deserve to be in there. Let me ask you this, Cole, just because I know you're an Auburn guy, and you know I'm probably from my voice an Alabama guy. But again, Alabama wrote their own fate. You know, they lost at Vandy, lost at Oklahoma. So that, as everyone is saying, they have only themselves to blame. But let me ask you this. If Vegas put odds on a game between Alabama and this bracket, how many teams would Alabama be an underdog to? 6? Are you going to tell me they'd be an underdog to 12 teams?
No.
I think Alabama would not be favored against Georgia. I don't think they'd be favored against Ohio State. I don't think they'd be favored against Tennessee. I don't think they'd be favored against Texas. Penn State. I don't know, Greg. What do you think? I think it'd be close.
Yeah, toss up.
They wouldn't be favored against Oregon. So, and the one thing that I would correct you on there.
Vegas line, though.
I know it. One thing that I'd correct you on there is the committee didn't put Boise and Arizona State in. They didn't place them. I mean, those were automatic bids that everybody agreed upon. That's, in my opinion, that's the one thing that we can't be mad at here. Like, we agreed with the system. The system's what it is. And for now, as you heard Paul Finebaum say, parts of it probably going to change pretty quickly. But that's just part of the system as far as those teams. Some of these teams maybe didn't earn their way in based on how we see it. Those teams earned their way in. They won their conferences. They're ranked where they're ranked. They got in. That's not placement, and that's why part of this is not the 12 best teams. This is a partial invitational, and some teams took advantage of that, and they're going to get a chance to play in the college football playoff. But the committee didn't place those teams in. That didn't happen that way. Hastings is on the Buyers Right hotline. Hastings, welcome into the show.
Yeah, hey guys. I can tell you this, when we talk about ratings and stuff, like I guarantee you the committee wanted SMU to win, and so did the TV execs, because they were sitting there licking their chops over the thought of a first-round Alabama Notre Dame matchup in South Bend. So I mean, like, you gotta say that they did not take that into account. I do think that. Who was it? Ari from On 3? Is that the gentleman y'all spoke to earlier in the show?
It was, yes. Yes.
Yeah, I disagreed a little bit with what he was saying when he kind of went after Greg on the strength of schedule and really took a strictly Alabama approach. Look, I mean, you're sitting here differentiating between, and this is Alabama. I mean, this is South Carolina, Ole Miss, and several others. Really good losses in comparison to really good wins, and you can talk about, well, they lost to an 8-4 team. Like, they had really good losses. Well, they lost to the only competition and teams with a pulse on their schedule. And to be honest with you, you can bring that up for Indiana, SMU, really Clemson other than SMU. But if you're going to have that conversation, then you really got to take a look at Texas, too. I mean, Texas didn't have the daunting schedule of the SEC that everybody thought they would. And every time they played somebody who was really well-developed, they lost. I mean, it was only twice this season. But at the end of the day, you know, they didn't lose to your Vanderbilts, your Oklahomas, but also week in, week out, they're not sitting there having to play Georgia, get up for Georgia, and then have that letdown week. Play LSU, get up for LSU, then have that letdown week. So I think there was a lot that kind of goes with ebbs and flows of this season. But I'm not here to say who gets in, who doesn't. I mean, I think you guys are completely right. I think it is a flawed invitational, and I think Greg Sankey did this in order, as well as Big Ten, they agreed on this just to expand the field. But I think that there's going to be a lot of frustrated people in that SEC office today, knowing that a 3-loss Clemson team got in over a 3-loss SEC team based on the format of this. And so I know that it comes up in 26 as far as those negotiations. And I look for there to be a change. The automatic qualifiers, I think that's ridiculous if you're truly trying to get the 12 best teams in. And, I mean, they have this in the NFL. I mean, if you do win your division, you are in. Do I think it's right? No. But you definitely shouldn't get a first-round bye if that's the way you want to do it. So I just think from a fan perspective, it's frustrating because – yes, it'll be, and there will be good ratings. I mean, there's going to be some riveting games with a lot of good storylines, but I think you do kind of dilute the field and disappoint some who wanted to see some of the other rankings and maybe not see the ASU, who, yes, granted did win their conference, but didn't do anything that thoroughly impressed me as far as the teams that they played. And they did look good. I mean, they looked good in their championship game. But I think there's got to be a change in criteria. And I think, Greg, you were right. I think as far as the dilution of your strength of schedule or the conference championship games, I think they had to make the call. And I think they went with the call with the strength of schedule because they locked themselves because they do playoff ratings before the final Saturday, which puts them in a bind and doesn't allow them to make the right decision. So that's my spiel. Hey, appreciate it, guys. Great show today. We'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Hastings. Great stuff. Good call. Always appreciate the feedback, and there'll be more opportunities for you guys to get in and discuss the college football playoff, who's in, who's out. The one thing that you want out are the critters of your home, the rodents, the varmints. You don't want the mice. You don't want the rats. You don't want the possum or raccoons coming into the attic, the crawl space, or the garage. And our friends at Wayne's can now help you. They have wildlife removal services, wildlife prevention services to go along with treating your yard, taking care of the termites in the summer, that mosquito protection that they're going to give you. Greg, there's just so many reasons that our listeners need to call Wayne's.
Yeah, Wayne's will take great care of you. The wildlife removal, and I love the Smart Pest, knowing it's safe, pet-friendly, child-friendly. It's going to have us where we want it. That's for sure. Call them a day, 866-WAYNES-1. Visit callwaynes.com and let Wayne's continue to create your happy place.
All right, when we come back, we'll give you a couple college football coaching updates. We'll give you some NFL draft updates. The transfer portal, we're going to need some time because it's a lot. It's deep, it's heavy. But we'll give you an update on that later this hour. Continue to get your feedback, your thoughts on Alabama not being in. 800-239-9569. Text into the show 205-834-9450. You can always tweet in at Mac and Cube. We'll get to your feedback next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. 8:33 a.m. Monday, December 9th, Jocks 94.5, college football playoff on the minds of all of our listeners, and we're going to get your feedback on it. A couple coaching updates that we have for you, as there are new coaches that are in, other coaches that are out. I want to sort of start with this situation with Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State over the weekend, Greg. We hadn't had a chance to really talk about it, but this was odd where Oklahoma State kind of wants him to accept a new deal where they can put more money towards NIL, and obviously with revenue sharing coming, trying to restructure some things. He didn't want to do it. And then they say that they've got reason to basically fire him with cause if he wasn't going to take the new deal. Then he decides, I guess, to take the new deal, and then we see Todd Grantham, most likely going to be Oklahoma State's new defensive coordinator. This was just weird. I mean, if you've got the goods to fire someone with cause and you're just hanging on to them, that just feels odd in and of itself that you would possibly attempt to use that on them, but you're not using it on them and going to allow them to stay. I don't know how comfortable this feels for the future of Oklahoma State football with what's been going on the last 4 or 5 days.
No, very awkward, but his contract's a little unique. It's basically a 5-year perpetual contract, which is not that dissimilar to what we've seen in other places. Like Bill Self has one at Kansas to coach basketball. It's essentially a quote lifetime contract. So every year that you're still there, they add another year. It's like a perpetual over and over and over again. So this was basically a negotiation to get his buyout down in the event in which they're still unsuccessful next year and they go 3-9 again or something similar to that. They'll be able to fire him with a lot less owed money. That's the way I understand it. It's the way people with knowledge of the situation have explained it to me. It makes sense because a perpetual contract makes no sense to me in college football nowadays, knowing how quickly you can go from the penthouse to the outhouse or from the outhouse to the penthouse, like we've seen on both sides this season.
Is that essentially like what Mark Stoops sort of has with his deal, where I think it's if he goes to a bowl or if he is above 500, it's an automatic rollover and he gets a little bit of a bump?
I don't know. I'm not as familiar with his. I've never looked at it, but I know that the rolling perpetual contract to me is a terrible deal for the university, especially when the ebbs and flows of the sport right now are so ridiculously high. And It's not like Gundy's been a beacon of consistency either in this time there over the last 17, 18, 19 years. So I'm not sure what the deal is, but yeah, they basically wanted to lower his buyout. So if he stinks it up next year, they can fire him, owe him a lot less money.
Yeah, I believe Stoops' deal is structured in a similar fashion to that. I don't know the exact parameters, but I do know that there's some automatic triggers in it for him having a good season. I think part of those triggers for Stoops are if he does not get fired, I think he gets like some sort of a bump or something along those lines. It's a pretty unique deal, but it sounds like it's similar to what you're describing there. All right, your feedback. Well, a couple others. John Sumrall announces he's not going to take any of the coaching deals that are up. He and Tulane looking like they're going to agree to a new deal. UNLV is going to be without a head coach because Barry Odom's taking Purdue. And Greg and I shared texts about this one over the weekend, kind of like, huh? Like I felt like we gave the old like home improvement, huh? When we saw this one. Love Barry Odom. Barry Odom's done a great job. Purdue just feels really hard. But
yes,
with a massive TV deal in place, media rights deal with the Big Ten, you're at least going to be able to lean on that, and you're going to be included in that group that a lot of people feel just automatically gets the benefit of the doubt. Charles Huff, fresh off his Sun Belt championship at Marshall, is going to take the Southern Miss head coaching job. That might be as big of a head scratcher, other than just getting back to this part of the country. Tulsa's going to hire Trey Lamb, ETSU head coach, to be their new head coach, and reports are surfacing that Brian Harsin could be the next offensive coordinator at Cal. And I think the only downfall of that would be that we would lose some of the Twitter, but Cal would also be getting a good offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Cal had lost their offensive coordinator. So that was something that I was a little unaware of, but I'm happy for Brian to be able to get back in and dial it up. He's going to be without his quarterback, though. Fernando Mendoza, Cal is in the portal, and he's a dude. So potentially having to do it with a lot less there at the quarterback spot.
He'll be highly sought after. I don't think there's any doubt about that. All right, let's go to the phone lines, 800-239-9569, 800-239-WJOX. Get your feedback on this year's college football playoff field. Who's in, who's out, what'd you like, what'd you hate? We will start with Lane in Birmingham. Welcome into the show, Lane.
Hey, thank you guys for having me this morning. Appreciate the show and appreciate the both of y'all as well. My question is, now that with Alabama out of the playoffs this year, what do you see as the future outlook for the program? The mystique of Alabama football is dead. What are your thoughts going forward for next year? Do you think it's going to hurt us on recruiting? I see we already have a couple of guys that are in the transfer portal, so I'm just curious about recruiting. And also, next year, do you see us bouncing back and getting back in the conversation? So, thank you very much, guys. Thank you for the call.
G-Mac, I'm going to let you handle that one.
Well, first of all, the mystique, like I think the mystique has been gone for a while, but it's mostly because of the portal and because of NIL. Like, guys go where the money is now. You know what I mean? They don't choose a place because, oh man, I want to put that helmet on and run out onto the field at Bryant-Denny. So I think the good news is Bama's strapped with a lot of cash, a lot. They're in great shape financially. They just landed a top 5 high school recruiting class. And if you look back to last year when the portal opened for Alabama, when Nick Saban retired, the portal opens for 30 days. At that time, there was no one that was also open at the same time. So when Kalen DeBoer was hired, Washington came open, which means you had 30 days to go and get Washington players. I think they ended up taking 4 of those Washington players, 3, Parker Brailsford, Jeremy Bernard, and the quarterback Austin Mack. And then Michigan opened because Harbaugh left for the Los Angeles Chargers. They went and took a guy from Michigan in Keon Sabb. That was pretty much it. And then you could also take from Arizona. And they didn't take anybody from Arizona. So they had 5 guys that they were able to backfill because the portal wasn't open. People could take from them, but they couldn't take from other people because if they wanted to go get, say, a tight end from Oklahoma, they couldn't go get him because the portal for Oklahoma was not open at that time. They went and took 5 guys as best they could. They knew that they were really light on numbers in some spots. So in May, when they reassessed what they had, they only had, not many guys enter the portal in May. So they were able to add a couple, but not many. So they really didn't add great quality. And they really had position groups that were really thin because of the timing of when the portal opened for them. They now have a month to really look and evaluate, assess the players, and check out the portal. And the portal right now is filled with potential game changers. Now, finding the right guys will be very important because I do think that finding character still matters. If you look at Arizona State and some other teams that have been playing well down the stretch, like they have a really strong culture. SMU has a very strong culture. Like culture, I think still matters to Kalen DeBoer. So it's going to be important for them to get to know the players that are entering the portal and are they going to be coming onto your team with, the same motivations as you want? That's important. But I also think that there's a lot of guys in the portal right now that I think would look great in a crimson uniform. And they're going to be able to go out and really get aggressive there.
All right, let's go to Rob. Wants to chime in on college football playoff. Rob, welcome in. You're on the Buyers Right Hotline.
Hey, good morning, guys. I just want to say, first of all, premise, I'm an Alabama fan, but I just want to say I am stoked about the new process, the new system. I was sick of having the old system where it was just 2 teams and 4 teams. Because you just never knew. You never knew if you actually had the best team that was sitting out maybe 5 or 6. In this case, we got 12. We know this is not about the 12 best teams or most deserving teams. This is about number 1. And all you're trying to do is set up a process that incents people during this season, i.e. win your championship and get a bye first round and ultimately find the number 1 team. And the reality is Alabama doesn't deserve it. I mean, we had a stronger strength of schedule, but we lost 3 games. If you're in the SEC, you deserve a break. If it gets down to the end, we might get lucky and get in. But if you lose 3 games, even in the SEC, you really don't deserve to be going for the national championship. We need to be looking in our own backyard. Previous caller asking about what we're going to do in the future. That's the kind of questions Alabama fans need to be talking about, not whether or not we got ripped off. If we'd have gotten in, that'd been awesome. I would have loved it. But it would have been grace. We didn't deserve it. We had a bad year. It's time to move on.
Appreciate the levity and reality there, Rob. Really good call. Thanks for joining us. Bama Greg on the Buyers Right Hotline. Welcome in, Greg. How does Bama Greg call Bama Greg?
I just want to echo kind of what the last caller said. I agree. We didn't deserve to be in. If we got in, fine. That's cool. But I just want it to be known, i.e. Bama hater and the other callers, and there's not a lot of Alabama callers crying about us being left out. Maybe I haven't. I just got in the car and only been driving for about 25 minutes, but so I haven't heard the whole show. But I don't think you've got very many Alabama fans crying because we should have got this or we should have got that or whiny, whanny, why, you know, just crying about the way the system's rigged. Because, yeah, there's probably 5 or 6 teams we'd be favored against. But guess what? We lost 2 games that we shouldn't have lost in the story. And, you know, so I'm happy with us being left out, and that's why I said that last week whenever I said what I said, and that other dude thought I was crazy. But I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. That was the show.
Appreciate the call, Bama Greg. And here's my thing on it. Look, and let me allow myself to put some Bama glasses on for just a half second. So please allow me just a quick moment to look at it from a Bama fan's perspective, from a family of Bama fans. My view on it is this is a really good learning lesson. And I hate it. Nick Saban used to always say, never waste a failure. Never waste a failure. I'm almost happy. Like I said, this is from Bama fans' perspective. I am happy that this happened. Because had they gotten in, it would have reinforced, hey, we don't have to do the right thing all the time. We still got in the playoff. We were afforded the benefit of the doubt. But guess what? When you touch the stove and it's hot and you get burned, you're not going to touch it the next time. So I think there's going to be a lot of good that comes from this. In buy-in, in weekly respect of the opposition, in practice habits, in knowing that, hey, when you have the ball in your racket, you got to serve and hold serve. I think good will come of this. And while it hurts in the short term, yeah, of course, as a Bama fan, I'm disappointed this season ended the way it did. The regular season, that is, still a bowl game to play for, and still a chance to extend that 10-win season streak. Still a lot to play for, in my opinion, but I think this is a good learning experience for the young players on the team and for the guys that will be coming back next year, knowing that you can't play with your food. You gotta play at a high level every week, and if you don't, you're in big trouble.
I quickly tell you about Backyard Adventures. Put the playground up in my backyard, and when I say that, I mean it. They came and assembled the entire thing, put it all together. I didn't lift a single tool. We've got monkey bars, rock wall, slide. The kids love it. They're playing on it all the time. Neighborhood kids come over. They can do the same for you. Go to their office at Cahaba Valley Road. It's all put together. Your kids can jump, climb, swing, slide on all the different options, and then they'll customize it for you. Also, the basketball goals. Heard GMAC talking about his. We had to get one. My son's out there shooting all the time. I got buddies tell me all the time when I bump into him, man, the kid's out there shooting all the time by himself. He loves it. Gets him outside, gets him away from the screens. And, Greg, I know it's been the same experience for you.
Yeah, we love it. It's been a great addition to what we have around the house. And I know the kids, look, I just don't like the screen time. I mean, when I was a kid, I was outside playing all day long. If the sun was up, we were outside. And I want that for my kids as well. And Backyard Adventures has really allowed us to prioritize time outside as opposed to just being locked up inside. So really appreciate the guys at Backyard Adventures. Go see them off Cobb Valley Road. They can do the same things for you that they've done for us. You can also go check them out at backyardalabama.com.
All right, get a quick break. Come back. More of your feedback. 800-239-9569. Tweet in at Mac and Cube next on Jocks 94.5. All right, welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, 8:51 a.m. Monday, December 9th, right here on Jocks 94.5. Right back to the phones. Jason and Pelham, college football playoff. Your thoughts?
My first thoughts is I'll probably have to slap Dabo Swinney's mom right off the first pew of church this coming Sunday based on how disrespectful he is towards Alabama after the game of trying to just – he doesn't want to play Alabama. That's clear that he went to bat for SMU. And what happened to you, Greg? McDonough intimidate you? Did he intimidate you into speaking the truth? I'll tell you how you follow. All you had to do was stick up for your alma mater a little bit. Ain't nobody going to call you a homer. Are you afraid to answer those calls? Because I know most of the people in Bama land thought they were gritting at the bit, chomping at the bit, waiting on you to say, hey, well, you know what? I sat and watched this whole game, and if this team that just played got in the playoffs, I know about X amount of teams that would beat them, and they don't stand a chance at winning at all, in my opinion.
I don't know that. I personally don't know that. So if you
think SMU can win it all?
No, I don't know that, but I don't know if Bama can either. I don't know that. I don't know if
Bama has a better shot at winning the national championship than SMU.
You going to let him answer one of your questions? You going to keep talking?
Hey, Cole, I thought you did a good job, but you ain't got to stick up for your buddy. Why don't you just shut up?
It doesn't matter,
Why don't you shut up and let him answer?
All right, that's it,
I'm
John.
right here. I'm right here, partner. If you'd let me
No.
talk, I'd love to talk. Oh, that's fine. Look, I mean, here's the thing. I didn't give an opinion. I simply said, I don't know if the committee wants to create a precedent on conference championship games, and I think it's a dangerous precedent if you start creating, de-incentivizing participation in conference championship games. That's all I said. I didn't say anything. And frankly, I'm not sure who the caller was. I'm sure he's given a lot to Alabama. I get that. But I put on the crimson helmet. I went through 5 years in Tuscaloosa and trying to put and dedicate time and dedicate a big portion of my life to Alabama football, and I'm deeply indebted to everything Alabama's done for me, for sure. But I honestly didn't think Alabama was going to get in based on how things went. So that's all I was saying. I mean, what do you want me to do? Sit there and say Bama should be in regardless? Y'all, they lost by 21 points to a 6-6 football team.
Yes,
that's a hard thing for me to stomach.
Greg.
Well, that's dumb. That's dumb. I have a job to do. I'm going to call it how I see it. And that's exactly what I did. And I think I'm pretty good at my job. I think my bosses think that too. So I don't really spend a whole lot of time concerning myself with the lunatic fringe that wants me to sacrifice all integrity in favor of showing fandom. I'm just not going to do that. Do I think Bama had a real argument? Absolutely. Do I think SMU did too? 100%. Which is why I didn't ever give an opinion. I simply stated the facts of the precedent that could be created with one particular outcome that McDonough was presenting. That was all it was.
Chris and Kalira on the Buyers Right Hotline. Welcome in, Chris.
Hey, guys. I'm with you on the last part, Greg. When they set the schedule for Alabama this year, they assumed that Vanderbilt was a break in the schedule and that Oklahoma wasn't going to be as tough as LSU, Tennessee, and Georgia. So Alabama dropped the ball, and us fans have got to realize that. They should have won those games, and they lost them. So appreciate you guys.
Appreciate you, Chris. 800-239.
I come from the school of personal accountability. If you come up short, you look in the mirror, you try to do better the next time. Alabama had every opportunity to secure a playoff spot, and they weren't able to do it. And is that disappointing? Absolutely. But you have to own the mistakes and the shortcomings that you had in that process. And sounds like our previous caller isn't capable or able to do that. He wants a victim mentality, and I'm not going to subscribe to it.
We'll get more feedback next hour. Chris Vanini has details on some of the specifics with home college football playoff games. He'll give us those details when he come back next right here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Hour number 3 underway. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, Monday, December 9th. Chris Fanini in just a moment. College football playoff bracket is set. Championship Saturday, we haven't even taken really a lot of time to go through how some of the games played out as Georgia took the SEC championship game, 22-19, hell of a comeback for the Bulldogs. Boise State took down UNLV Friday night, 21-7 to get the Mountain West title. Army handled Tulane 35-14 to take the American title. Oregon over Penn State 45-37. Clemson took down SMU 34-31, last-second field goal from 56 yards out to get that win in the ACC championship game. And Arizona State pounded Iowa State 45-19 in the Dr. Pepper Big 12 championship game. So those are your conference champions, how things played out. Then the bracket was set. We've been through it. We'll go through it more, spend more time on the matchups. But first, we'll get to Chris Fanini, who joins us now to talk about some of the specifics around just how home games from the college football playoffs perspective are going to work. And this is something that we have not seen, something that we were really excited about. And Chris saw some of the information that you were sharing yesterday. You can find Chris on Twitter at Chris Fanini. And I'm interested in sort of the ticket allotment and what's going to happen for teams that are traveling, because we know how it works during the regular season, but specifically that part of this, how is that going to operate for home teams and for visiting teams in the college football playoffs, first round?
As it relates to tickets, I wrote the story about a month ago because I knew this was going to be a thing that nobody was quite thinking about until we got to that Selection Sunday, and we're here. And visiting teams will get 3,500 tickets. That is their allotment. That is pretty typical for a road game. Different conferences have different policies on this, so the CFP had to kind of find the middle ground for everybody, and that's what they came up with. 3,500 tickets, maximum of 500 of those for the visiting band, and at least 1,500 of those 3,500 must be in the lower bowl, and the band must have some access to the field. Home teams can handle it however they want. A couple weeks ago, some of the schools started putting out ticket requests, Texas, Alabama, and the such, really for season ticket holders and whatnot. So it's supposed to mostly work like a normal home game, although it is at the discretion of the home team how exactly ticket distribution works. But prices are about, I forgot what prices. The CFP had to set the prices themselves. I think it's about $100 to $250 in that range, depending on where you're at, because different teams do different prices different ways. So they had to kind of make it all one thing.
So what, how is the, I guess, it sounds like you can put requests in if you are a season ticket holder. It sounds like if we're talking about for the home team, it sounds like if you're an alumni, you get a first crack at it based on your donation history. How will the tickets work for the home teams that will now be hosting?
That depends on whatever each school wants to do. It's up to their discretion. However they want, if they want to just season ticket holders, you get your spot in your normal seat, that's fine. Some people may have to change a little bit because of the visiting allotment that may be more or less or in a different spot than it normally is. But yeah, it's up to the schools to do that. I think some are trying to handle it pretty normally. They know there's a lot of demand for it, so it just depends on how each school does it. And as of today, I haven't checked in with each school to know how they're doing it, but they've been preparing for this for months.
Chris Fanini, you can find his work at The Athletic at Chris Fanini on Twitter, joining us now on the Buyers Right Hotline. Chris, you've done a magnificent job over time covering the Group of Five, and as that has morphed into whatever we're going to call them now or into the future, those conferences, those schools, those programs, what they've gone through, how they've operated. I just want to get your thoughts seeing Boise State in, SMU in, and I understand where they are now. It's not an exact situation to what it was at one point in time when you covered them that way, but to see them be able to get in and to see Boise grab a 3 seed in the college football playoff, just what were your thoughts, and maybe give us a little background if you've thought about it and you've have it of just what it took for them to reach this point.
Yeah, it just upends everything we imagined about the playoff for the last couple of years. Even at the beginning of the season, ESPN was incorrectly attributing the Group of 5 spot, or saying the Group of 5 team was going to be the 12 seed. And I think a lot of people just assumed that would happen, and it didn't. Boise State's ranked ahead of 2 other conference champions, or they're the 3rd highest ranked conference champion, which is remarkable. And it kind of helps people understand how this playoff format actually works. The fact that Clemson ended up as the number 12 seed. But I also think it was unique. Boise State has a 3-point last-second loss to the number 1 team in the country in Oregon. That is not going to happen most years. It may not happen ever again. So the Big 12 was upset that Boise was ranked ahead of them. And so I know there's some concern about that. But I do think it's kind of a one-off thing. I do not expect Group of 5 teams to be getting the 3 seed regularly moving forward. But Boise State, I mean, this is a team, they knew they were a really good team coming in. They knew Ashton Genty was going to be a really, really good player. They started a Heisman campaign for him before the season. Now, I don't know if anybody expected he was going to potentially break Barry Sanders' single-season rushing record, but that was there. The previous coach, Andy Avalos, had put together a really good collection of talent, and then Spencer Danielson, who took over for Avalos when he got fired, has really maximized that. They had a 5-star recruit come in. Malachi Nelson transferred in from USC. He didn't win the job. It was Maddox Madsen, kind of an underheralded guy who won the quarterback job and has played really well this year. So it's a good season for Boise State. It's a pretty good draw to get a bye. And knowing you're playing Penn State or SMU, like, I certainly wouldn't rule out Boise State's chances of winning that and getting to the semifinals.
It's certainly possible. I do think this is a great season for the G5 to have this. And look, hey, it's not their fault. The format is what it is. And the conference champions, top 4 conference champions, get a first round bye. It's not their fault. But do you think this will essentially accelerate them adjusting the format? Because when you see a team with a strength of schedule that's somewhere in the 80s, having the number 3 overall seed feels like it's a tough thing, I think, for a lot of people to swallow. So I think this ultimately, while good in the short term, might actually be bad for the G5 in the long term. Well, no, because I think changes for 2026 and beyond felt likely anyway. The commissioners are going to meet at the national championship game. They're going to kind of go over how things have gone, and they're going to start talking about what's next. And the Big Ten and the SEC control the power over what happens next. I mean, it was the beginning of this year where there was talk about already changing the format and doing that. So they've already been trying to do it. Same with the idea of, Alabama missing out on the field. Is that going to spur the SEC to do something? I mean, maybe, but they were probably going to do it anyway. I do think it matters how Boise State plays in that game. If Boise State beats Penn State or something, then the conversation changes. If they get blown out by somebody, the conversation goes a different way. So I had said coming into the year that there was a lot on the line for the Group of 5 here this first season. They couldn't have a team ranked 20th or outside of the top 25 take a playoff spot. It would have been a really bad look and a really difficult thing to defend. Instead, we got the complete opposite, where Boise State overachieved and took a higher spot than anybody expected. So I think it's still good for the Group of 5. It's much better than feeling like they stole a bid, because this doesn't feel like what happened. Now what happens in the playoffs, we got to see.
Chris Finiti joining us on the Buyers Right Hotline, just talking details of the first round of this college football playoff, how it'll operate for home teams. I did want to get your thoughts as well on another team that you formerly covered in a little bit of a different way that seemed like they were going to make a pretty good transition, and that's UCF, now going back to Scott Frost as their head football coach. Gus Malzahn going to go be the offensive coordinator at Florida State. Is this the right move? Is this a good move? He was an analyst with the Rams this year, so been out of the college game for a minute. What do you feel about the future of UCF football with the announcement of Scott Frost as their new head football coach?
Don't know. These reunions, sometimes they work out great, sometimes they work out terribly. UCF in 2024 is a very different place than UCF in 2017. That UCF team in 2017 that went undefeated, under Scott Frost. A lot of that talent had also come under George O'Leary before him. But in the modern game, it would have been really hard to keep that talent together. There were a lot of NFL guys on that UCF team. Go back and look at UCF's NFL draft history. That team was loaded with dudes who were going to play in the NFL or did play in the NFL. That's not even including Mackenzie Milton, who didn't because he got injured. Can UCF get and retain that talent in today's game? I don't know. Scott Frost kind of came in on the front end of that whole transfer NIL era at Nebraska before he got fired. And we haven't really seen him since then. Like he's kind of been not doing anything or doing a little bit of stuff with the Rams. So I have a lot of questions. I do think he regrets leaving in 2017 and going to Nebraska, not just because of how things worked out, but I was there when they beat Memphis in the last home game before he took the Nebraska job. He was in tears, and he indicated that he wanted to stay, and he only left because it was home calling, because it was his alma mater calling. But the athletic director, Terry Mohajir, he loves offense. He loves coaches who coach quarterbacks. Scott Frost fits what he typically does, and he knows the place. So it's a good start, but it's hard to say any coaching hire will or won't work out, especially a coach we just haven't seen for a while.
What's your overall assessment of the Big 12 and its long-term viability as a power player in college football? Because I do wonder a little bit, look, maybe it's dependent on how Arizona State does. Maybe it's dependent on what happens with Colorado, all this stuff in the future. I still feel like UCF can be a big player. I think it's one of the best jobs in the league. But I feel like it's a league that is very, very wide, not very deep. And I just wonder about the resources kind of across the board. So what's just overarching evaluation, Chris, of where the Big 12 is and where it might be going?
Well, I think the Big 12 had a season we all expected, which was anybody could beat anybody, and you didn't know what you were going to get week to week. And that's why we went into the final weekend with, 4, 5, or 6 teams that were still in the mix to make the conference championship game. And given your hand, that's kind of what you have. But leagues are defined by their top programs, and you need the schools with the most potential to live up to that potential. That is Arizona State, which did. That is Utah, which did not. That is TCU, which is kind of in the middle, went 8-4. You need those schools that kind of have the ability to get the most out of them to go 11-1. 12-0 or something like that, and really keep the Big 12 in that conversation when being compared to these other conference champions. Because parity's great, parity's fun, but parity doesn't win you the big games at the end, and that's what you need. You want a team that's going to make the semifinal potentially and have the Big 12 be there. As good as the SEC has been for 20 years now, as deep as it has been, it's been fortunate, and its best calling card is that it hasn't beaten up on itself, and it has had a team win the national championship most years. The SEC has been defined by the national champions, not by the depth of the league. And for the Big 12, depth is fine, but you want to be defined by having teams that can compete for the national championship.
Chris, really appreciate the time today. Just some interesting insight on how things are going to work for these home games, home playoff games that we just haven't seen. We don't know. We didn't know what was going to go on, how it was going to operate. You brought some clarity to that. Appreciate it, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Chris Fanini of The Athletic. Follow him on Twitter at Chris Fanini, giving us some insight to this first round of the college football playoff, which is new to all of us. We haven't done this before. We don't really know. One thing we do know, Greg, Bromberg's has exclusive inventory for all of our listeners.
Yeah, Bromberg's is amazing. I was there last week. Know that if you have a gift, or honestly, I just went up there with my wife. It just made it easier. Allowed her to create a wish list. That way I know, not just for this holiday, but for the next one and the one after that, I know what she likes. We have an amazing group of friends that are salespeople up there that take great care of us. And I know you guys, you'll be treated the same way we are, man. Just like your family when you walk in there. And know when you make some of these purchases, they might be in your family for multiple generations. So go and check them out in one of their 2 locations in Mountain Brook Village at the Summit, or you can go online at brombergs.com.
All right, a lot more to get to as it pertains to the college football playoff. We will look at some of Championship Saturday, how those games went down, how the teams got in, what happened in those games, more on Alabama not making the college football playoff this year as well. We get your thoughts on that. 800-239-9569. Text into the show, 205-834-9450. Before we go to break, I didn't plan to talk any Major League Baseball today. Juan Soto signs a 15-year deal for $765 million with the Mets. You and I both kind of laughed when the $700 million number was thrown around, like almost Shohei Ohtani money. They were able to find that number. Now, obviously, 15 years is a lot, but holy mother, G-Mac, $765 million for Juan Soto. He's a hell of a player, don't get me wrong. If you can get it, take it. But baseball in New York changes, that's for sure. And with there's some youngsters coming up like Ronnie Marciano for the Mets. You continue to build around Juan Soto. Could be a fun team to watch. And wow, that is a absolute ton of cash.
Crazy. 15 years, crazy. The fact that he's only 26 is crazy. 51 years annual average, or 51 million per annual average is pretty amazing. Considering Shohei, his deferred cash is equivalent right now to about 43 million. So he's getting 51. He obviously collects it right now. In deferred, Shohei's at 70 per, but it's right now, right? So it's crazy that he was able to eclipse a two-way star by 8 million per on annual average. It's insane. So I don't know if that means that the Shohei deal is incredible for the Dodgers or what, based on what the market value was now for Juan Soto. He's an amazing player, don't get me wrong, but wow, that is... I don't know how you can justify guys being worth that much, but maybe they know something I don't know about where MLB finances are going for some of these teams.
Absolutely. All right, we've got portal updates for Auburn and Alabama, and we get your thoughts on the college football playoff field. 800-239-9569 next on Jocks 94.5. 9:20. Jocks 94.5, Monday, December 9th. Listen online, jocksfm.com. App is in your app store, iPhone, Android. You can download that for free. One other coaching note, Utah's Kyle Whittingham will be back for one more season with the Utes. They released that statement yesterday, so Kyle Whittingham going to give it one more go there in Utah. The transfer portal opens today. We could go through all of it. It would take 3 shows for us to get through all the names that we've heard from over the weekend. But some notable quarterbacks, Ole Miss quarterback Walker Howard, who essentially got beat out for the backup job in Oxford this year. Ohio State quarterback Devin Brown, a little bit more of a mobile QB, maybe not as polished as a passer. Either one of those do anything for you, G-Mac?
Devin Brown's intriguing. He's obviously a great athlete. I don't know what kind of thrower he is. If he could show me that he was an adequate thrower, he'd be a guy that I wouldn't be too down on bringing into the mix. But it's just hard to recruit guys off limited tape, right? It really was.
No, it's I haven't seen much of Walker Howard. I know they love the way he spins the ball, and he's got a big, strong arm. I've watched him in warm-ups. But I also know that he had every opportunity to be the backup and maybe even push to be someone who was ready to go right away behind Jackson Dart and couldn't get that done. Some other
it's
coaching.
It's just hard to recruit guys off high school tape, though. Like, I think once you're this far removed from high school, it's really tough. And I know he's a highly touted prospect coming out, but I don't know where he's at now.
Other coaching news quickly before we finish the portal. I'm just seeing this come down. Herb Hand is going to join Gus Malzahn as the offensive line coach at Florida State. Herb
good hire.
I think so. Yeah, I think Herb's a good coach. I think he does a good job.
Has there ever been a bad O-line coach?
There have been plenty. Actually, we've discussed them on the show and privately. But Herb and Gus have been together for a while, so obviously they understand the scheme and the system. UAB quarterback Ricky Lee III has entered the transfer portal. Former UAB quarterback Jacob Zeno, according to Steve Wiltfong, is going to end up at Texas A&M. So maybe having a veteran presence there as you work in Marcel Reed could add some value to that. Transfer portal locally also, Alabama offensive lineman Miles McVay, wide receiver Kendrick Law, wide receiver Caleb Odom, tight end Danny Lewis, among some of the players that are officially in and expected to enter the NCAA transfer portal, G-Mac.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Danny Lewis was a guy they kind of liked. So we'll see what happens there. I do know that there's some irrational negotiating that is going on in certain places. So I think there'll probably be some more guys that enter the portal, but we'll see. There's also going to be some guys that get taken care of because they've played well and performed. But usually when it comes to asking for more money, it's usually dependent on being good and doing what you're supposed to do and playing at a high level. So don't be surprised if there's more guys that are in the portal at some point here very soon.
Auburn safety Caleb Wooten apparently plans to enter the portal. Antonio Kite in the portal. Wide receiver Caleb Byrne plans to enter the portal. And quarterback Hank Brown now officially in the transfer portal. So some local guys that have entered or will be entering, according to multiple reports, the NCAA transfer portal. Want to talk just a moment on Georgia and Texas, G-Mac, 22-19. This was just an ugly game early. Fumbles everywhere, drops everywhere, penalties to take points off the board, penalties to extend drives, penalties to put teams behind the chains. And I think when you had your starting quarterback Carson Beck get hurt on the final play of the first half, you didn't see him come out with the team. He walks out later without his helmet on. You see Gunnar Stockton begin to warm up. You just think to yourself, man, can Georgia pull themselves out of this one? But they were able to. And they were able to do it largely because I think ATN began to find his way running the football. 16 carries, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns. He caught 5 balls for 41 yards. Georgia ran 37 times, 141 yards. Texas ran the ball with their running backs 21 times for 53 yards. Now, obviously, didn't have 53 yards because of sacks, but they couldn't get it going either way on the ground. Quinn Ewers did have a decent day through the air, 358, but he threw 2 picks. One just flat egregious. Gunnar Stockton, 1 egregious interception, but I thought, considering the circumstances, he came in, did some good things. I liked how Bobo called the game with him. You come to the line of scrimmage, you get a check play 1, you get it out to the back in the flat. He hits that little comeback route. Arian Smith actually catches the football, which is a big benefit to him. You move the pocket a little bit, you give him a couple boots. The throw on the run to Lawson Lucky, where he toe taps the sideline, is a great throw, is a great catch. Had a couple balls that sailed on him, threw one really bad pick. Like, there's no excuse for it. I think he was trying to throw it away. There's no way he thought that crosser was going to be there. And he's a little bit off. I think maybe the ball slipped out of his hands. Had a couple tough runs, showed physicality, of course gets knocked out of the game. Carson Beck then hands the ball off, and Georgia wins the SEC championship. But when you went back and watched it, what kind of stuck out to you on this SEC championship game, G-Mac?
How physical it was. I mean, that was a bloodbath. Was it not? Like,
it was.
Goodness gracious. It was a war now. And I mean, it was fun to watch. I mean, it was physical and a lot of hitting. And the thing that's irritating about both times that these two teams got together, it was just a sloppy game in some places. You know what I mean? There were just parts of it that were just flat out sloppy. Whether it's, I mean, dude, I was pretty, I don't want to say like, irritated is probably the right word. Why were the pass sets for Texas, like, I felt like their O-line, some of their pass sets, I'm like, what are they doing? I mean, it's like they were putting themselves in a blender with some of their pass set stuff. Like, what was going on up front?
Yeah, I'm not real sure. I do think that one of the bigger disappointments of this game, when I went back and watched it, Greg, was the same mistakes Texas made the first time those things were happening again. That pull protection, they got caught with penetrators in that a couple of times. Got caught in slide protection one time, allowing defenders to be able to get through. They had a corner crash actually get the ball out for a sack again. How does that happen? How do you allow that to take place when they had one that was about a backbreaker for you in the first game and another one that almost happened in the first game? And you're going to let that happen to you again? Those are things that I have no understanding of how that can take place. Also, I don't know if you noticed this, like the Texas inside zone stuff, it's almost like they were hopping and side shuffling on some of their inside zone stuff. Like, it was more lateral and less off the ball than I have seen it previously. Like, that was disappointing also. And I don't think Texas could have just mowed Georgia down, but you don't try to go at them at all. Like, you don't try to catch them in a stunt in an inside zone, or you don't just try to see if you can get a little bit of a push. Because I thought Georgia played light in the box most of that game because the safeties were coming down making plays in the box against the run. Corners were making plays against the run. And those were a couple things that stuck out to me about the Texas plan that I thought Quinn locked in on receivers and routes a couple times. Like, he just felt like he knew he was going to go throw the corner multiple times. He's like, I'm throwing the corner route, or I'm throwing the fade, whatever that was. And then the one interception, just what is that? He just makes up his mind before the snap. I'm throwing this route.
There was
and he
a
just
few of those. I think he was so concerned about the pass rush. There were a couple decisions where it was just a little premature. You know what I mean? Like, I think the pass rush is what accelerated his decision-making process. And there were sometimes like, all right, I like the pre-snap. I'm going to trust it because I got to get rid of the football. I think that's part of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it was ugly. All right, I want to get some more feedback from the college football playoff rankings. Going to do that in just a moment. You're going to have to wait for that. One thing you never have to wait for, though, is your dental care.
That's because Family Care Dental has you taken care of. They're the urgent care office where you can be seen the same day. They have 5 locations now to make it easy on you: Hoover, Fultondale, Homewood, and Alabaster, but they've recently opened up an office in Trustful as well. And here at the end of the year, you have those dental benefits. Don't let them expire. Get in, use them today at Family Care Dental. Call them at 874-9605. That's Family Care Dental, 874-9605.
All right, let's go back to the phones. A lot of folks want to get in. Bob in Pike Road wants to give his thoughts on the college football playoff. Bob, welcome in. You're on the Buyers Right Hotline.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for calling, buddy.
Hey, Greg, I want you to know something, brother.
What's up, buddy?
For an old-time Bama fan that went through the doldrums of the mics back in the early 2000s, you are a freaking legend at Bama, okay? You brought us
I appreciate
back.
it, buddy.
I
love the Tide. I love the Tide, but I hope everyone understands that, you know,
you got a job to do.
that you got to separate. You got to do what you got to do sometimes.
Hey, and I was in the end zone where Darius came in, caught the interception over in Pasadena. Dude, I was there, and it was magical, okay? So never think that Bama Nation doesn't love you. You're a legend, okay? I just wanted to say that, okay?
I appreciate it, my friend.
This is something that I think nobody's talking about. And in my judgment, I think there's not a power 4. There's a power 2. And then you got the other 2 conferences and then all the other ones, okay? There's really, in my judgment, 3 levels of conferences. Big Ten, SEC, and I think SEC stronger than the Big Ten, but it's close. And then you got the ACC and the Big 12, and then everybody else under them. And so I think we're doing a disservice by calling it a Power 4 because it really ain't a Power 4, it's a Power 2. And nobody is talking about what Nick Saban said yesterday, and nobody really responded to it. But he made some kind of inclination, and I hadn't been able to see anybody write down exactly what he said. But he talked about a 30-team group kind of breaking off, and it was subtle. But you got to remember what Nick Saban doesn't say anything offhanded, shoot from the hip. It's all intentional. And so I want to know, did y'all hear him say it? And what's your thought that may be the future of college football? And look, again,
well, I heard it,
Greg,
and it raised my antenna.
Hey, Greg, you're a legend to my son, and you're a legend to me, brother. Thank you.
I appreciate you, brother. Roll Tide. Here's the thing.
I hope you take Bitcoin for the kind words. I'll shoot it over to you.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, man. We've hinted at it for 2 years now. It is inevitable that the Big Ten and the SEC will eventually pull away. The only question is who is coming along with them, because there might be other programs that come alongside. And when do they pull away? It's going to happen. And I think that with some of the things that have gone on in college football for a really long time, I think we're closer than ever to getting to that point. It might be 10 years from now, it might be 15 years from now, it might be 2 years from now. I don't know. But I do think it will happen at some point. And I'm not sure anybody can deny the likelihood of it happening at this point either, Cole.
No, it's and I didn't hear what Coach Saban said, but I do agree with what he said about the fact that Coach Saban doesn't just say things flippantly. He says things that he has information on, or that he has studied, or he believes, or he's had conversations about. So, but we've mentioned this before on the show, that the great separation, the great divide is coming probably sooner than later. Don't know exactly how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, who's going to go, who's not going to go, but ultimately, I think it's going to come down to money, and it's going to be playing by individual rules and really and truly not sharing. I think those are going to be the key cognizance of what pushes that thing forward. So we'll continue getting to your calls on the other side. A lot more feedback from you. We'll see a couple of you on hold. I'll get to those there. Before we go to those, Greg, tell our listeners about Polar Bear Services.
Polar Bear Services can do so many different things around your house. They've added plumbing to their incredible list of services, but they've always had electrical, and they specialize in the HVAC system. As the cold weather is starting to roll in, you need to make sure that your HVAC system is ready. You need to make sure that your home is prepared to enter into the winter months without any issues. Get them out today for a whole home checkup, a tune-up, a repair, maybe even a new installation. And remember, if you have a problem with your electrical, plumbing, heat, or air, just pick up the phone and call the Bear. It's 205-497-BEAR. That's 497-BEAR.
All right, when we come back, a couple of NFL entries to the draft. We've got those for you. We continue to get your feedback on Alabama not in the college football playoff right after this on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. College football playoff at 9:38, Monday, December 9th, right here on Jocks 94.5. A couple entries into the NFL draft we will update you on. Shamar Stewart, Texas A&M defensive lineman. No surprise there. He is exceptional, had a great year. He's entering the NFL draft. Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma State running back. I didn't know this was an option, by the way. But he's going to the NFL draft. I would just assume that he was going, and I honestly didn't know he had another year of eligibility. Josh Simmons, Ohio State tackle, injured a couple weeks ago, says he's going to go ahead and enter the draft. Deion Walker, Kentucky defensive tackle, got to get his pad level lower. He's going to enter the NFL draft. Armand Mimbu, probably the best right tackle in the SEC this year from Missouri. He's going to enter the NFL draft. Devin Neal, running back out of Kansas, is going to the draft. Trey Harris, Ole Miss wide receiver, going to the draft. And Landon Jackson, Arkansas defensive end, going to the draft. Landon Jackson knocked out of that Missouri game. Hated to see that, but I think that probably means these guys not playing in the bowl games. And Trey Harris, I mean, Doring said it yesterday. G-Mac, we were talking about who's going to be available, not available for these bowl games, and Doring's like, I think Ole Miss has probably figured out how to operate without Trey Harris. They've had more games without him than with him this year, so that's not going to be the determining factor of how they look in their bowl matchup.
No, I think they'll be fine without him. It's unfortunate. It's always the what could have been for Trey Harris because he was phenomenal when he was out there. The problem is he was banged up quite a bit in his career, even dating back to his time at Louisiana Tech. So it's unfortunate, man. Really a great player, really talented kid.
Listen, if you're just feeling banged up, maybe you lack energy, you're getting poor sleep, you feel on edge, could be the effects of low testosterone. Game Day Men's Health wants to help you. And here's what they're going to do for you. Go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com right now. Set up a free consultation. With that free consultation, you get a free testosterone test and a free PSA test. Right out of the gate, they're going to know what your baseline health is after that takes place. Then they're going to present you with the options that they have to be able to make you feel better. You can save 10% on any of those services, by the way, by mentioning Cube at Game Day Men's Health. Weight loss, multiple programs. They can help you get the weight off there and help you be feeling better after the holiday season or maybe even heading into Christmas. Don't want you to get out of control. Let them help you today with your health. Minimal upfront costs from the programs that they offer. Holistic approach to health and wellness. GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com today. Sign up for that free consultation and tell them you heard about them right here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Chris in Coleman wants to chime in on the college football playoff. Chris, welcome into the show.
Hey, morning, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Good morning. Thanks for calling.
Morning.
Yeah, so, as a Bama fan, I'm totally fine with where we're at because the product on the field just didn't match up to what met the standards. So I'm totally fine with that. But where I'm trying to validate the whole strength of schedule argument and other things is, well, I think this will help me, and I want to get y'all's point of view and comment on this, but I think the Army-Notre Dame deal is pretty interesting because Notre Dame lost to NIU, and that should be a punishable game because of it hurt the strength of schedule versus Army. They only lost to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's pretty high up in the playoffs. So give some perspective on how that sits, and that would, I think, help a lot of the Alabama fans if they argue about strength of schedule. I think this scenario right here would give a lot of light to their argument and help them understand just in general why Alabama's strength of schedule is really not a player in this because of the product they did on the field was just not up to snuff.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily it's a player. I just don't think it's as big of a player as it should have been. You know what I mean? Like, in my opinion, with expanded play, and everyone's different, and Cole's opinion might be different than Saybear's and different than Damien's. Like, everyone might view it differently. You might view it differently than us, but I think strength of schedule should be really, really important because not all schedules, even within conferences, are created equal anymore. You can make the playoff without playing in your conference championship game. That never used to be the case. You had to win your conference to win the national championship more often than not, unless other teams screwed it up in other places, which would allow you to get in the back door, and then you can maybe get hot and go on a run. So that's been really the way things have gone for a very long time, and it's not that way this year. So I think they should value strength of schedule more. They didn't. They valued win-loss record more than strength of schedule, and I think that's something they probably need to look in the mirror about moving forward.
Do you think it's because strength of schedule fluctuates throughout the year and it looks more at the what have you done for me now versus the conglomerate of the whole season? Is that a reason why you think?
I think that's some of it. Let me tell you, like, if you're asking the question as to why Alabama was out, if you want my honest opinion, I think if Bama loses to Oklahoma by 3, seriously, like, I really believe this. If Alabama loses to Oklahoma by 3, I think they're in the college football playoff. Like, I really, really believe that. But I think the optics of that game made the strength of schedule argument in favor of Alabama a little bit less meaningful. You know what I mean? If they lose that game by a photo finish field goal at the end, I think they're in. But because they lost the way they lost and they showed really no life in that game whatsoever, I think that was something that was just too much for the committee to overcome. Therefore, strength of schedule did not get weighted enough, and ultimately Alabama found themselves on the outside looking in.
I agree with you totally on that. I'm a realist. My personal opinion was I was emotionally done after the Oklahoma game just because of the inconsistencies of we've got a good team on the field, bad team on the field, good team on the field, bad team on the field. That's where I was as a Bama fan. So I'm totally fine with the decision of Bama not making it. And the only scenario that I saw Alabama could have got in was if SMU, the higher ranked, if they would have won handily, and then Clemson, who was already outside the top 12, if they'd have lost, I think that was the really only shot for Bama in the current makeup. But I agree with y'all that if Bama's product on the field would have been consistent throughout the year, only had, like you said, a better showing, didn't even have to win, but just a better showing, it would have favored them better. But I appreciate y'all guys, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you very much for the call. Appreciate that. Your feedback on the college football playoff rankings, you can text in 205-834-9450. Call 800-239-9569. Hank is in Trussville, wants to chime in. Welcome in, Hank.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Doing great.
Good morning.
How are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. But look, explain something to me, Greg. I'm an old 74-year-old guy, and I'm sort of slow these days. But y'all keep saying, and you said a while ago, that old guy that jumped on you, that evidently his mother goes to the same church down there in Pelham. But I'm not going to be nothing like that guy. But look, you keep saying a bad precedent would be set if they let the two colleges that were playing in the ACC or any championship game, and you didn't let them into the playoff. But hasn't the SEC been doing that since '92? I mean, when Florida played Alabama for the SEC or the first SEC championship, if Florida had won, Alabama would have been out, and they were ready to go for the national championship. And the same thing happened just last year. Alabama and Georgia played in the SEC championship game. Alabama beat Georgia, and Georgia was out, and they were the number one ranked team in the country. But I didn't hear none of that about, that was a bad precedent. We can't set a precedent. But all of a sudden this year, and it's not just you that said, I mean, that guy that you work with, Donahue, whatever his name is, and I've heard a half a dozen times on the SEC.
Well, I'll say this. I think it's completely understandable. It's just you got to understand it's a very different scenario with the field now expanded to 12. You know what I mean? It's any precedent that was set in the 4-team era is going to be slightly different than the precedent that's set in the 12-team era, because think about how many teams are in the field that did not play in their conference championship game. There's a handful, right? So I think that's what's different this year is that conference, and think about who's on the committee. There's a lot of college football coaches. There's a lot of administrators. ADs and such, they value and put a great premium on conference championship games. They're extremely profitable. They're very popular. They're kind of a part of the college football ecosystem, right? They're very important, or at least they have been since 1992 when Roy Kramer decided to launch the SEC championship game. They've been very popular for 32 years. So if SMU was in before they played the conference championship based on how the committee ranked them. What's to stop SMU in the future from saying, yep, we're not going to play. We are in. The committee said that if we don't play this weekend, we are locked. We cannot improve and we cannot hurt our resume if we don't play. That's what they said about Alabama and Miami and South Carolina and Ole Miss. Said they're not playing this weekend. They cannot strengthen or weaken their resume at this point. So if SMU was at 8 and the committee said that, then what's to incentivize them to play in the conference championship game? Nothing. So they might actually say, hey, ACC, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to sit this one out. Like Lane Kiffin talked about a couple weeks ago, coaches don't want to play in the conference championship game. So there was starting to become some momentum about teams saying, yep, we're not going to play. And that is not healthy for the sport. So that, I think, is the precedent. And that's why this year's different, because it's 12 teams than it has been in the 14 playoff or the 2-team BCS era back in the day.
All right, my friends at Royal Automotive want to help you experience how car buying should be. 4 Royal-owned dealerships, 1 location, selection and savings unmatched. Royal, the only place to find over 20 unique truck and SUV options in one spot. Right now, get up to $15,000 off select 2024 GMC Sierra models. Sign, then drive with 0 down, 0 security deposit, 0 first month's payment, and 0 due at signing on select Volkswagen Atlas, Tiguan, and Taos models. Or sign and drive any new Volvo XC40, XC60, or XC90 models with 0 down, 0 due at signing, and 0 for your first payment. Go see my friends at Royal. They'll help you get the best deal available. All offers valid through January 2nd. Certain restrictions apply. Royal Buick GMC, Royal Volkswagen, Royal Automart, Volvo Cars of Vestavia Hills, all at the corner of I-65 and Highway 31 in Vestavia, and online at royalautomotive.net. Make Royal your first and last stop when car shopping, and remember, for every ride, there's Royal. We're going to wrap it up. Get your final feedback, couple texts, couple calls next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. segment in there? All right, final segment of the show, Monday, December 9th. College Football Playoff Committee has spoken, and we have the teams that are set. Text line has been full most of the day. Get to that in just a moment, but Crocker Moving Services wants to help you get your items wherever else they need to go. GMAC, tell our listeners how they can do it.
You have Crocker Movers. They're a local company owned by an Iraq War veteran, Eric Crocker. Crocker believes in hiring movers you can trust to complete full background checks and run drug tests on every single employee. These are good guys, and you can trust them in your home. Whether they need your whole home packed up and moved, your company headquarters moved across country, or you just want them to come rearrange your living room, these guys got you covered. They also do deliveries for furniture that you purchase need to get to your home. So call or visit them online today for a free quote. The website is crockermovingservices.com. It's crockermovingservices.com. Support your veterans by choosing Crocker Moving Services for your next move.
Damian, what's the text line saying about the college football playoff?
It's been pretty active today. 205-834-9450. You can always text in. Chill text in. He says, why not just set a rule that if a team declines to okay in the conference championship, it's considered a forfeit. You keep the importance and eliminate the chance of teams declining to play.
So we're opting out of not only bowl games, conference championship games.
Okay,
all right.
But the problem is, like, there's teams that don't qualify that are getting that get propped up. Like, I mean, tell me exactly how Indiana at 11-1 is sitting there chilling, doesn't play anybody, lost the one game that they had to play by 23, and no penalty for them. Like, I just don't know if you can do it. I don't know what you do. I really don't.
What else you got over there, Damian?
Going back to Greg's encounter with the caller, Mike texts in and says, Greg, you're too kind. That caller's primary contribution to Alabama is running his mouth. Nothing productive.
Listen, we're open to anybody's opinion here on the show. You can call us and tell us that we're wrong all you want. You can tell us that we're dumb. We're not going to just be disrespected for the hell of it. That's not going to happen on the show. Sorry. One more, D?
Josh from Tuscaloosa says, I think it's ridiculous to compare Georgia to Florida State regarding the quarterback because Gunnar Stockton gave the Dogs some juice. They didn't look worse.
We haven't done that, and we're not doing that. So we got multiple games of Florida State without Jordan Travis. It's not the same thing. Your CBD store now has products to help you lose weight, to help you with arthritis, anxiety, you or your pet. If you want to feel better, get a better night's sleep, your CBD store can help. Largest brick-and-mortar CBD retailer in the world, first company to have USDA-certified organic oil supplements. Stop by one of their 3 locations, Highway 280 by Bailey Brothers, 150 by the K's in Cleveland, Trussville just off 459. We're back tomorrow, 7 to 10, 3-man front. More playoff talk coming up next.